Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'll call to order our City Council meeting. Tonight is Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. All members of the council are present. 7 of us are here in person. Six of the 7 of us are here in person. Councilmember Bloom is joining us virtually by Zoom. We're also joined in person by council office staff, by the mayor, number of his staff, number of residents, also some folks online. I apologize in advance, but one of the folks joining us is A Partridge, and no, we have not yet been joined by a pear tree. I'm sure they've heard that joke 1,000 times, so I saw the name and just had to recognize them. So thank you for taking time to join us in person or online tonight. First item of business is going to be the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be offered by Mr. Greg Davenport, who is our utilities manager. So we'll stall for just a second or two and then turn it over to Greg for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Next item of business is going to be public comment. This is your opportunity to be heard by the City Council. If you're here in person or if you're here online, if you'd like to talk about anything, it doesn't matter if it's on the agenda or not, now is the time for the council to listen to you. So we typically don't engage in dialogue back and forth. If there's somebody who needs to follow up with you on a specific item, we'll typically have somebody from either the council office or the mayor's staff get your contact information. But this is really an opportunity for us to listen. We do ask that those who speak try to help maintain the quorum of the meeting and avoid personal attacks. We won't allow for anonymous comments online either. So please share your name and your city of residence. If you're online and you wish to speak, there should be a little icon at the bottom of the screen that you can hit to raise your hand. If you're here in person, I'd invite you to start and come up to the podium if you'd like to share any thoughts with us. I'm not seeing anybody in person. However, I am seeing Mr. Wilkinson online. Mr. Wilkinson, let me allow you to talk. You should be able to unmute yourself now. Beautiful. Looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead and proceed. You'll have 3 minutes.
Oh, hello.
Perfect. Mr. Wilkinson, proceed. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Hey, I was able to review the 2023 plan. I believe that's up for, I don't know, decision tonight. There's several things in there I wanted to address with the council if I could. And this is after addressing the 2012 plan. A lot of the stated goals are the exact same, verbatim, word for word. I'll give you some examples. An issue that's of particular concern to me, which has been addressed with the council before, is environmental noise. In the 2012 plan, the South Valley Regional Airport was deemed to be a major generator of noise. That's your words. In the 2023 plan, it's deemed to be a major generator of noise. So this begs a lot of questions. If you knew this was a major generator of noise back in 2012, why are you expanding the airport? Why is there an expansion plan there and improvements and things going on? If it's a major generator of noise that you acknowledge. Several other issues here. The goal to address this problem is well, your stated project here is these regulations should ensure that noise emitting activities and adjacent uses are adequately buffered. This was in both the 2012 plan and the current plan. So I'm curious what adequate buffering has been done in the last 11 years. My guess is none. And I would challenge any of you to get back to me on that, to tell me what's been done. How do you buffer an aircraft? You put up walls? This is stupid. Your project here will not work. It can't work. So I'm asking someone to tell me what this means. Adequately buffered. What's been done in the last 11 years? What do you plan to do to curtail the noise at this major generator of noise that you have acknowledged? So someone get back to me. I've already emailed your city council about this. He's the listed contact. I don't think I'll be hearing from him. So Mr. Wall, if you're listening, please respond to my email or have the appropriate person do that. Yeah, I have many more questions. I wish I had more than 3 minutes, but whoever you pay to recycle these plans or whatever, man, pushing that copy and paste button, I hope they got their money's worth. I hope you did too. Shocking. Verbatim, word for word, same goal after a decade. What's going on there? You should all be ashamed. You should all resign tonight. Unbelievable. Is that my 3 minutes?
Yes, that is time
Okay.
right there.
Yeah. Resign, please, all of you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Wilkinson. And is there anybody else who would like to address the council this evening? All right. Seeing none, we will close citizen comments and move on to special recognition. Tonight, we'd like to recognize a few folks who have been nominated to serve in various capacities as volunteers with different committees here in the city. These are nominations that are coming from the mayor's office. So I believe we're turning this one. Mayor, were you going to be the one walking through the introductions for these folks?
I was going to, but since Ariel is here and he didn't know I was going to do this, I'm going to turn this over to Ariel. So Ariel, if you want to come up, and then there's a slide deck, so it'll be easy for him. He made the slide deck, so I know it'll be easy. So if you want to start with the first slide.
Mr. Campos, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Sweet. So we have a couple of appointees tonight that I've been working with quite closely, and they're fantastic. And first, we'll start with Whitney Rosas. She's right over there. She's going to be part of the Healthy West Jordan Committee. Her experiences are in Salt Lake County Health Department currently as a health educator. She helps build relationship with the community members and the stakeholders. She was also a wellness coach, and she created mutual understanding of how to address their health condition, health status, and risks. So when we talked, you should be a fantastic fit in this committee, and so we're glad to have her here and take a vote tonight, see what happens. Yeah. Next is Ben Bolingbroke. Did I say that right? Bolingbroke. He reached out asking to be a part of the community and how he can help out. So just checking out his resume, I thought he'd be a great fit for the Sustainability Committee. He's worked at the Connect to Health Clinic volunteer. So he's worked at the 4th Street Clinic, which I can only imagine is a lot of experience there. And listening to people, and so I believe that Ben can bring that type of energy into our Sustainability Committee to listen to our residents and perhaps see what we can do. And he was also a graduate at the U of U. And yeah, we'll go to the next one. We have a couple there. And then Brian Beebe, I think is back there. Did I say your last name correct? Beebe, thank you. Brian reached out, very enthusiastic about the airport, so it was obvious he could fit right in the airport advisory committee. I experienced this. He was a safety manager on a $2.5 billion Salt Lake City terminal redevelopment project. So we all seen the new airport. I can imagine, right? Is it that one or? You just built it. All
For
right.
those listening at home who may not have caught the audio, he's very, very clear that he was just on the construction side, nothing to do with that design.
All right. Okay. So he knows a lot about safety. When I first read this, I love knowing that people can be safe, and if you can bring that to the committee and make it safe for our residents, I thought that would be great. And then we can move on to the next one. We have a couple of them tonight. Jordan, maybe I see here. Oh, hey, Jordan. Great. Jordan has been fantastic. I've been communicating with him for a bit. I think he would be a perfect fit for our diversity committee. He brings, he's enthusiastic. His animo, or I don't know how to say it in English, is a gust, or just it's there. It's very palpable. So I thought he would be a great person to have in our diversity committee to really represent our underrepresented groups in our city, and also bring the talent that he has from his communications major from BYU and bring it into our committee. And that also leads to our last appointee is Rocio. And Rocio is, again, enthusiastic. She would be a fantastic fit in our diversity committee. Since COVID hit, our committees have dwindled a little in the sense that we haven't been putting fresh people in, and so now that we're starting to get that momentum going, Rocio, along with all the other appointees, just have so much enthusiasm and experience. Rocio is the founder of a nonprofit called Una Amiga, which is a nonprofit that extends their reach to our Latino community, not only here in West Jordan, but all of Utah. And I think that would be a great voice to have in our diversity committee. And that's all the appointees for tonight.
Mayor, anything to add?
I'm so excited to get our committees stronger and going. COVID was a tough year for us, but I'd like to hear what your committee on committees has to say.
The committee for mayoral appointments would be Councilmember Pack. Councilmember Pack.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yes, we're certainly grateful for all who want to volunteer and make a difference in the community with their time and talents, and it's how we on City Council got our start. So be careful, because once you start volunteering, it's addictive, and it's nice to make a difference in the community. So thank you for attending in person as well. The subcommittee on mayoral appointments, comprised of Councilmember Jacob, Councilmember Bloom, and myself, have networked together, and we wholeheartedly support the mayor's recommendations for the individuals that Mr. Campos presented tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Pack. I would look to the council for discussion. We'll start with Councilmember Green.
I am going to start with Resolution 23-006, but I'm going to offer an amendment. Let me pull this up. I'm going to move to approve Resolution 23-006, inserting in line 14, so that the entire paragraph reads, whereas Mayor Burton desires to appoint Whitney Rosas to serve on the Healthy West Jordan Committee as a non-voting member, and adding the words as a non-voting member. City ordinance prohibits residents or non-residents as being voting members in the code. So I would like to add that section to the ordinance. So I'm going to make that motion to approve with that addition.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Whitelock. Any discussion to the motion? Councilmember Jacob.
Just curious, who's our council liaison to the Healthy West Jordan Committee currently?
We don't have liaisons to the
Or
specific
council.
committees anymore.
Oh,
with the change in form of government. We just have the formal
Okay.
committee.
So who's the last council member to go to a Healthy West Jordan committee meeting? One or you? So my question for either one of you is there much voting that happens in these meetings?
Yes,
What
there's
kinds
a lot
things
of
are voted
voting
on?
that happens. They vote on if they're gonna do a 5K, if they're going to, what programs they're gonna do, if they wanna spend money a certain way.
Okay. 11 years ago when I was on that committee, there wasn't a lot of voting that happened, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other discussion to the motion? All right. Cindy, could you walk us through a vote?
Yes. Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes?
Councilmember Bloom, or Vice Chair Bloom,
Yes.
Chair McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
and Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Thank you. I show the motion passes 7-0.
All right. Back to the council, unless Mr. Anderson, did you have something to add?
No.
All right.
I'll move to approve resolution number 23-007.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Worthen. Any discussion to the motion? All right. Cindy, could you walk us through a vote on this one?
The basis of the motion.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Chair McConaughey,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bloom,
Yes.
Councilmember Green.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 7-0.
I'll move to approve resolution number 23-008.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Worthen. I'm not seeing anyone with their light for discussion to the motion, so we'll just go straight to Ms. Quick for a vote.
Councilmember Pack, or no, Councilmember Pack, yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bloom,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Chair McConaughey.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 7-0.
And then I will move to approve resolution number 23-009.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Worthen. Again, I'm not seeing any other council member lights for discussion, so we will go to Ms. Quick for another vote.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Chair McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Bloom.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Quick. Thank you for those who have offered to volunteer and have just been appointed to those committees. If you we would like to take a quick picture with the council, with the mayor, with those of you who have volunteered to serve. We also have a signed copy of the resolution. With Councilmember Bloom not being here, her signature is not there, but you've got the other 6 of us that we'd like to give you as well. So if you would please come up front, we'll do a quick photo. Again, thank you so much for those who took the time to apply to serve here in the city. There are a lot of different opportunities to serve in a lot of different places, whether that's with our sustainability committee, with the airport committee, Healthy West Jordan. There are a lot of opportunities where diversity committee, a lot of opportunities for you to share your thoughts and your talents with the city. So please take a moment, check the city's website. You're also welcome to reach out directly to either the council office. You can reach out to the mayor's office for a list of any of those opportunities. Next on our agenda, we have reports to the city council. We will start with city council reports. Are there assignments or other duties that have been performed in the last couple of weeks that need to be reported back to the city? We'll start with Councilmember Whitelock.
So I took the opportunity to go to you first, and tour their facility. It's a great facility. It's yet another one of those businesses that I look at and think, I'd like to work there. This is really cool. They have, not only do they have a lunchroom and a gym, they have a game room with Pac-Man and Mario Kart, and looked pretty cool. Was pretty fun. But the best news is they're bringing 130 people into our city to work with plans to expand. The building is complete. And they're also using thermal heating to heat the building, not gas. So that's pretty cool. They've also put into the project the capability of having solar panels in the future. So, and their long term, they could build 3 more buildings there for growth. So it's exciting to have them. We welcome them to our city. Utilities Committee is working on bringing forward some things. And even though I feel like I shouldn't do this, I'm going to tell you that the waste areas are going to be stinky. So it's going to not be great. But you'll have options to look at. For LPC, legislative session wrapped up. They are done getting us new rules to follow. I think they passed 500 and something bills. So, that's a lot of new rules that we're going to have to, in the city, figure out what we need to do to comply, what code we have that we need to change, as well as other political subdivisions. We'll have that work to do. And we will now move to monthly meetings. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you. I had my first meeting today as a trustee on the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District Board. There's a lot of words in that. Went well. I don't have anything specific to report back on. I'm just getting my feet wet, so to speak. And there's a lot of information, so it is somewhat like drinking from a fire hose. But I will have more as there's more coming down the pike. I don't know if this is going to be in the legislative roundup later, but one of the bills that was passed this year affects those local districts when they want to do a tax increase. They have to not only come and tell the member district, the member legislative board, so come here and tell us that they want to do a tax increase. They also are now required to get the sentiment of the legislative body. Now, it doesn't say we have to vote. It just says we have to express a sentiment as a legislative body. So keep that in mind. Hang on to that one when they come to talk about tax increases in the near future. So.
All right. Any other? Oh, Councilmember Worthen.
Yeah, we had our last budget committee meeting. I did send out the notes. Everybody should have gotten those in your emails. And our next meeting is on the 14th. So just make sure if you do have any questions, let us know, and we will ask those at our next meeting.
All right. I'm not seeing any other lights from council members, so we will move on to the council office report. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. For this one, I'm going to allow Cassidy to give you a little report on the survey.
So I've continued to work with Y2 on implementing suggestions from the council on the survey. Some things that we have worked on together is shortening some of the questions to make them easier for our residents to read and to go through the survey a little bit more quickly. We've also added some follow-up questions based on the interest of some council members, and we've updated the questions to reflect our practices within the city. For example, the communication question, which I know the council has discussed several times, even before we had someone to do our survey, was talking about how do you find information about the city? How often do you want to be contacted? That question has been updated to include utility bill inserts and also whether or not they use email to contact the city. So we've added things like that, and I'm going to email them back tomorrow and give them the all good on our questions. So I'm excited.
That's all we have for tonight. Thank you, Council Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Anderson. We'll turn now to the mayor's report from the mayor's office. And for that, we'll start with Mayor Burton. Sorry, that's about as long as I could stall.
I'm actually going to come up here and talk to you for a minute. So there was a request that I make a report. I don't have a full report, but I'll give you some answers about parking in West Jordan, particularly during the storms. So I've been monitoring the parking for several months. I get a report once a month from our courts that tells me how many parking tickets were written. It doesn't tell me what they were written for, but it tells me how many parking tickets were written and then what happens to those tickets. And as I monitor those reports, I have found that the months that it snows, our parking tickets go down, and the month we have good weather, the parking tickets go up. And so as I talked to the chief about that, he said when it snows, they are busy handling crashes and other incidences. So if we could report the parking problems, or the residents more likely, prior to a storm, that would help them a lot. Once the storm hits, though, they understand how important it is for the snowplows to get through. So if the snowplow sees there's a problem, they can't do a street, and they call that in, they will make sure they get resources there, because that's a property damage possibility, and they will have someone out there immediately to go either ticket those or get them removed in order to get those streets plowed. That's a short answer to a long question, but we have been monitoring that for months, and I'll continue to do so and see if we can come up with some good plans to find a better way to do that. The best thing I found is some resident I went and talked to. I went there and I said, "So you have some concerns about parking?" He said, "Yes. You see the neighbor right next door." And I said, "Yes." I said, "So do you want him to have a ticket?" He says, "No, because that would be a problem." He said, "So what can I do?" And I said, "Probably the best thing you could do is have a neighborhood watch program, put that neighborhood watch program into place, and then so your neighbors know what the rules and ordinances are, and then your neighborhood could patrol that and make sure they're aware that they need to move their vehicles when it does that, and it happens there. Then if there's a problem we can't get resolved, they would know how to escalate that to the police department and get that done." So I've been pushing that a lot. Ariel left is the one who helps people get their neighborhood watch programs up and going. So he's been getting lots of referrals throughout the winter for neighborhood watch programs. And so we're thinking the best thing you can do is talk to your neighbors. Also, personal responsibility would be really good too. But talking to your neighbors and working that out is something we're working to try to see if we can help create that better. Okay, now on the next one I want to talk to you about is, because this has been brought up a couple of times, about traffic calming. So when we got our new traffic engineer, Nestor, he's only been here, how long, Brian? 2 months? 2 months. This man is amazing. He's done more in 2 months than I ever imagined would happen. So Brian and I sat down and we talked with him and said, we want to make sure we do effective traffic calming in our city. And that's been the two biggest complaints that I get as the mayor. One is parking and the other is traffic calming. But it's interesting because when people are parking on the street, that is a natural traffic calmer. And then when people aren't parking on the street, then they're driving too fast. So one kind of eliminates the other one. Anyway, so when we had the talk with him, in the past, West Jordan has done lots of speed tables. And when I get reports on speed tables, sometimes we put those in, and then I go meet with the neighbors a month or so later, and they're complaining that those speed tables aren't working. We want more. Well, I didn't have a desire to give them more, so they didn't get more. Also, I put in place soon after I became mayor that no speed tables go in without express permission from me, because I felt like they were happening too fast in too many places. So those slowed way down. There are 2 streets that I'm aware of that three streets I approved them for. And one of them was Dixie Valley Drive. And after those went in, I got a great deal of pushback on having speed tables on that street. We also do some other traffic calming things in the city. Dixie Valley Drive is a good example of that. We put in some bike lanes to help narrow the lanes down, to help slow it down, and some other things like that. But anyway, back to my conversation with Nestor, our traffic engineer. I said, find ways that we can do effective ways of traffic calming. I said, but I want data. I don't want just, we think this would work. I want some actual data. So he started and he put this is just an early draft form. You'll see there's lots of blanks in there still because he's still working on it. But to have this much in that short of time is impressive to me. So he's exploring all the different things, and then he's going to make sure we use data in order to find how that works. And I said, well, how are you going to do that data? Because what we've done in the past, we put little tubes out on the street, which we can't do in the winter months. And sometimes when the neighbors see them, they go out there with a hammer, they go tap, 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 and give us false reports. And he came up with this other idea, and they just came in the other day. And this is it. We have two sets of these. This monitors traffic, and it records it. It keeps track of how many vehicles they go past the point, what time of day they go, how fast they were going, which direction they were going, and if they were going straight or if they were turning. That is a lot of data. And we can just stick this on a light pole somewhere, on a tree whose branches are above 15 feet, a telephone pole, or some other things such as that. The straps there is self-contained, has a battery in there, so when we put it up there for a couple of days, 3, 4 days, whatever we decide needs to be, and then we have good data. And then if we find there's a spot or we know a location that maybe people are driving too fast and we see that happens on a daily basis between 4 and 5 p.m., we can send our police department out there and say, hey, would you monitor this area between 4 and 5 p.m. and you can take care of that situation, or other things. But this will give us information that will be applied to this to see what kind of traffic calming measures will work. And then after we put those in, we can put this back up and see what kind of results we're getting and if that's making a difference. Also, another thing that we started doing in the last few months is the radar feedback signs that tell you the speed you're going. Well, that's all they used to do. But now the ones we buy that we use, they actually transmit back into the cloud, and we can access the information anytime. And we can get a lot of that information this has. We can't tell if it's turning, but we can tell one direction, how fast it's going, and what time of day it's going. So we've been getting that information and comparing that and seeing what things are making advantages and using that. So the data he's getting to make decisions is so helpful that we know that we'll have success when we start putting the traffic things into place. The third thing I want to mention, these are all kind of interrelated. The railroad tracks over on 40th West, the bus barn that Jordan School District has sends lots of buses to go out there in the morning, and a lot of buses come back in the evening. And every bus stops at the railroad track, stops, opens up the door, closes it, and goes on their way. And sometimes in the afternoons when they're coming back, they back all the way up on 40th West onto 90th South and into the intersection and cause some problems. And the other direction just backs way up and slows traffic way down. And this has been a big concern. For 5 years, we've been working on getting exempt signs on there. There's some exempt signs right here on Redwood Road on these tracks lines. What that means is the buses don't have to stop every time because certain things go in place. To get those exempt signs, we had to put some special cameras on there. We had to move trees and other things back out of the way so they could see a further distance. Those just got approved today. That is so exciting after 5 years. And I'm sure Jordan School District will be thrilled about that. So that's going to resolve the problem we have in the afternoons on 40th West and 90th South. I know that was a lot. I tried to do it quickly. So I won't tell you about all the places I visited. Any questions or additional comments before I sit down?
Mayor, as we're working on these traffic calming measures, and I think we've talked about this before, let's just make sure that we start to build those into the new roads so that we don't have to go back and retrofit them.
That is so good. And so Nestor goes to those meetings when we're planning those for the new developments so that we can get those in early on and not, that way the city doesn't have to pay for it too. That's very good. Thank you. Good suggestion.
Not seeing any other questions.
Thank you. And then Corbin's got some more.
So this will be the city administrator's report, and we'll go to Mr. Corbin Lee for that.
Hi, I'd like Brian to give you an update on a number of items from Public Works, if that's okay.
All right, Mr. Clegg.
Thank you, Council, Chair, and Council. Just a few updates, project updates mainly, then we'll update on snow at the end here. First of all, Google Fiber Hut is being constructed in the south parking lot of Public Works. Today we approved the first Google Fiber encroachment permit. They will be starting on 6200 South to 6600 South from 5600 West to Cougar Lane. So that's the first fiber going into the city, the big area anyway. Update on 8600 South Flyover Bridge. That construction's underway. They're installing the piles right now. They're pile driving. If you drive out there, you'll see the big pillars in the ground now. They're working on that. That'll go on for about another week, barring some decent weather. 1300 West, Dominion Energy's in there right now, realigning where they're updating their high pressure gas lines. It's moving along. The project's moving along. We're waiting, before it can go out to bid, we got to wait for UDOT to approve our utility certification, which is relocating the utilities that are on the power poles that are going to be buried. So we're waiting on that. And then, let's see what else here on 13th. I got a big list. And then we've got one right away we're still trying to acquire, and that's moving forward. That's it as far as construction projects. Updates. Do you folks have any questions on that? And then I'll go to snow.
Brian, just real quick, might be good to mention that the path next to Mountain View is closed while they're pile driving.
Oh yes.
Those
Why
things.
they're yes.
Do you know when it's going to be opened, or if it's
It's
not
going to be shut
until-
down for quite a while.
until the bridge is
Till-
done?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
But they're going to eventually, from what I'm told, they're going to try to bypass it so they can still utilize it. but
Right. Yeah, I'm sure the path will
Yeah.
find a way through. I was just
They
curious.
will. People just make their own. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. If they don't, they will.
What's the anticipated completion of that?
Of the whole
flyover?
project.
Yeah.
Bridge. Yeah.
Spring of next year.
Okay.
So substantial completion. Then you got landscaping after that. But
So how long do you anticipate until the trail will be usable again?
I don't have that. It's September. Okay, September.
Is that something that we could potentially have posted for folks that frequent the trail so they know how long it's going to be?
Yeah.
Thank
Yep.
you.
The PI company for the project is. I know they've communicated it out.
There's
too, so.
there's road closed signs and there's detour signs, but there isn't a date on them. Maybe if we
Okay.
could put on like road closed for the season or for the year or for whatever.
Okay.
Trail
I can
closed,
follow up with them
something
on
like
that.
that.
Okay, we'll go to snow removal. Just an update on where we're at with that. It's snowing again, as you can see. I just wanted to go over the budget real quick. Like other agencies, our salt budget, we're over budget due to the snowfall, and our overtime is over budget. So if you're looking at the budget, we're over budget because of the snow. So. And I've been working with Denise to make some adjustments possibly for the following year, but this year is an anomaly kind of from the past years too. So, that's all I got. You folks have anything else? Questions?
How much are we over?
Right now. No, it's okay. Right now we're about, as of today, and we still got purchases coming through for salt. We're at 92,000 over in salt.
93,000, 94,000, 95,000.
It'll be
For those listening at
substantial.
home, if you couldn't hear it on the audio, estimate from finances, maybe 200,000.
And overtime, I would say probably 10,000 over in
Oh, that's not
overtime.
bad.
So,
All
It's
things
a good thing
considered,
we
size of
have
our budget. Yeah.
a rainy day fund, a snowy day fund.
yeah. Well, it's a good thing that we have a good fleet too. Our fleet is newer fleet and it keeps things moving. So thank you for helping us with that.
If you go back to years not so far distant, we had saved money by reducing the amount of plowing that was happening in the neighborhoods, and residents were very clear that this was a service that they were very adamant about having, and they were willing to pay extra for. And I think this is an appropriate use of those funds. So thank you for making sure that our crews are taken care of and our crews are staffed and our roads are cleared. I'm not sure how many caught some of the earlier news articles about the last major storm, but West Jordan did significantly better than other cities within the valley when it came to snow removal. We have some very, very good crews working incredibly hard and giving up time with their family to be with us. So thank you for making sure that can happen.
I'll pass that on. Thank you.
Councilmember Pack.
Oh, thank you, Chair. It was wonderful a few snowstorms ago to be able to do a ride along with snowplows, and it was interesting to see how the institutional knowledge that we have really does save quite a bit of money instead of having to replace blades. And
Yep.
if you don't know what you're doing or how to plow, and also the speed at which to do it, so it's not shooting over into people's yards and covering up sidewalks, and then you're having to go back.
We don't
and redo
guarantee that all the time, but most of the time.
So thank you to you and your crew for everything.
Thank you.
that's
I'll pass
going
it on. Thank you.
Brian, I have
Yes.
one question.
Sure.
With the GPS tracking system, that the software that we had,
Mm-hmm.
that apparently now we don't have.
Mm-hmm. Our
How-
our
how
license
much will
has run
that?
out.
Yeah. Our free trial is up. How much did that save us? Do you have any idea?
I don't have any numbers
Do you
for
feel?
that right
do you
now.
feel that was saving us money?
It was, yes, due to efficiency. Let me kind of explain how we used to do it. This is a very archaic way. We have a map on a wall with a piece of plexiglass on it.
Hmm.
We'd call in the first shift, they'd go out and plow for 12 hours, come back in and mark the areas with a dry erase marker on what they,
When they're tired
the-
after 12 hours.
yeah, where they plowed. With this program, of course, you folks have seen it, it tracks, we don't have to do that. We can go back and hit streets sooner that we've missed. If we missed any, most of the guys will pull it up on their phone so they know their route. I mean, I feel it saved us money in efficiency, but I don't know the number.
How did the team feel about it? Like, are they disappointed that it's gone?
A little bit, but we only had a license till March because we thought the snow would be mellowed out, but yeah, I did. But they love it, so it's been a great asset for us to try it out. There's still some tweaks and different things we need to do to the trucks to get some different readings if we do go with it. So
Okay. April 2nd, 1982, we had over 2 feet of
I
snow.
remember that storm.
So do I. I got married on that day.
Again, just for those who may not be familiar with what we're talking about with the software, there's GPS software that we have that can track which roads have been plowed by the snow plows, but not just where they've traveled, but is their blade up? Is the blade down? Are they salting? Are they not salting? And it can give you all that information in real time.
That's an added feature. We'll have to put the sensors on the trucks if we do go with this, but it's the options to do it. So
Thank you, Brian.
thank you.
That's it for me. Thank you.
All right. So next report to the city council is our legislative update. We're going to hold on this one for a little bit. We had planned for a short legislative update, thinking that we'd give Ms. Barker a little more time to put together a more comprehensive legislative roundup. However, as usual, she over delivers and she's ready with more information than we had slotted in the reports to council section. So we're going to proceed with a public hearing and then possibly one business item, and then we'll come back to the legislative wrap up. Mr. Anderson, did you have something before we go on?
Nope, this is just
Okay.
preparation.
All right, saw the light. So we will move on to our public hearing tonight. This is the West Jordan Comprehensive General Plan and the Future Land Use Map. I will skip any intro and turn it over, Mr. Anderson, to you, to Cassidy, to Ray, and then we'll turn it over to the public for any comment.
All right, thank you. I'll try and be brief and turn it over to Ms. Hanson. But first, what I want to do with the council is there are 3 members of the Citizen General Plan Committee. We originally started with 15. We had a few resignations. More people applied. Currently, we have 13 active members on the General Plan Committee. The 3 that I'm going to mention tonight were of the first group that started way back, if you remember, in October of 2020 when you appointed them to serve on the General Plan Committee. So I want to introduce the chair of the committee. That is Bob Lively. If you'll stand, Bob, and say hi. He's one of the first ones that you appointed. The committee selected him to be the chair. We also have Brent Rudy. If he'll stand, and he is, I need to tell you where they live, not their address, but what district they're in. So Bob lives in District 2, which is Councilmember Worthen, and Brett is in District 3, which is Councilmember Jacob. And then we also have Mr. Michael Wilson as another member of the committee. All of these were appointed that first time way back in 2020. The committee, what I will tell you, thank you very much. He's in District 2. What I will tell you is when they first started, they prepared a citizen survey. I think we started off with like 200, 300 questions, and the committee whittled it down. We used Qualtrics to send that out in a variety of different methods with the help of our communications department. They took that information and began making edits to the general plan book. They started out monthly meetings, and then there was a time there we did twice a month, I think, for a period of time. And they completed their service as far as getting the book ready, or the document ready, a few months ago, and it's been going through Planning Commission and such. I just wanted to recognize them, and I'll turn it over to Cassidy, Ms. Hanson, to go over the presentation.
Thanks, Alan. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So as you are all familiar, and this is just also a reminder for the public and anyone listening in tonight, there are 2 major components of the general plan, and that is the text of the general plan followed by the future land use map. Typically, as we've done outreach this past week, I have emphasized for residents on social media that if they feel overwhelmed by the general plan, because it is several hundred of pages, as you know, and have been reviewing, that the future land use map is a great place to provide comment, because I synthesizes like the goals in the general plan. So that's something we've been promoting this week. As we think about a general plan, and Alan, you can move on to the next slide. There are 3 competing, I guess you could say, entities on the general plan's attention and why the general plan is structured a certain way. So first we have legislative requirements. This is the code that tells us what needs to be in the general plan and why it needs to be in there. We have the residents' desires, which is why we have outreach and why we have a resident committee go through the plan. And then we have the needs of the city, and that's represented by various staff members and you as electeds. You kind of know a little bit more about, okay, this is what the city needs in terms of budget, in terms of moving to being bigger and broader, and those are kind of unique details that you know. So moving on to the next slide, I pulled this from the general plan. I don't want you to read it. It's a really bad visual, but it's more to show you like these are the things we had to think about as we were writing the general plan, and we have the statutory requirements. As we pass the general plan, I'm not really sure who in the state is in charge of reviewing our general plan, but we wanted to make it easy for them and say, hey, we met this. This is what chapter you can find it in. Hopefully this is helpful. And as we go through the plan and finalize it, I will end up hyperlinking all of our statutory requirements anytime we refer to our own code or state code. I'm trying to make it easy for people to find information in this age of information. So these are just some of the things that we had to work with within the creation of the plan. And then as Alan spoke earlier, we had a residential survey. If you move on to the next slide, Alan, I've included 2 visuals from that. And with this survey, the sampling wasn't overly ornate. So I think I don't want to say take it with a grain of salt, but this is like coming from residents who are very, very involved with our city normally. And this is why we're doing another survey, right? Is we want to reach out to residents who may not be as involved. But here's some of the results that I wanted to include. So we talk about what kind of family residential do you want to see? What would you like to see in your parks? And things like that are included in the plan just to show, hey, we're listening to residents. We kind of know what they want. This is what they've said thus far. And then you can go on to the next slide. I wanted to give Ray a chance to talk more about the process that we've gone through. Alan covered it pretty well. Ray, do you want to add anything else?
There we go. Yeah, Alan did cover some of the things that I was going to talk about. But I just wanted to say publicly, we really appreciate all the time and energy and effort that the General Plan Committee put in towards this effort. Chair Bob Blively and Vice Chair George Sadowski did a great job of keeping the General Plan Committee on focus, on point, on task. It took a little longer than we had anticipated by the time we put together the draft, and which is what you have before you. So that took some time. But we did, the General Plan Committee met over 20 times, and that doesn't include all the subcommittee meetings that they went through in preparation of this, the plan. I know that that one of the things that we're going to talk about maybe a little bit tonight is just the number of goals that we have in the general plan and how to address those. But and just so you're aware that the General Plan Committee did take out a lot of those, the repetitive and redundant goals. So there's a couple of things that we need to deal with yet. And one of those is just the future land use map and the proposed changes. I know that we talked about those at the Joint Planning Commission and Council meeting. We put those in, and I think you all got copies of or hard copies of that, the proposed changes on that. So if you'd like to talk about those tonight, I'd be happy to go through those with you. I think Mark's got that plan, and we can put them up side by side if you'd like to see those goals with the current future land use map and then those proposed changes. So with that, I think we just need to go through those at some point, whether it's tonight, another meeting. But this I think this meeting is primarily to get public input, and it's just another opportunity in addition to the open houses that we had at the Viridian and Bingham Creek Library, the Planning Commission public hearings, through the surveys, just another format and way to get additional public comment. So with that, would you like to go through those changes? And it's just not all the changes, but just a couple of the ones since that meeting. It's totally up to you guys.
Please.
So I'm going to try and do two things at once here, but we'll see how this goes. Yeah. Okay, so that should be pulling up on your screens here, but so this is the proposed future land use map in kind of its final proposed form. So I'm just going to go over really quick just some of the basic changes that we made. So most of the changes kind of more on the east side of the city. We're really more to just kind of reflect current conditions and just clean up some of the boundaries to make sure they're reflecting the current goals of the city and things like that. But some of the newer highlights. So there's a few areas in the city where we thought we'd add some commercial designations, again, just to reflect some of the more current conditions. So just to give you an example, on the corner of Redwood Road and Garner Lane, it's the old Bland Nursery. I think it's biograss right now, but anyway, we're proposing to change that to commercial just to reflect that current use and potentially future uses down the road. Then another one was over at the old Fairchild facility on 9000 South and 3200 West, just to see if we could maybe include some pad sites out there and kind of increase the commercial viability of that area. And then the final one was just to reflect the current project moving in, which is the Home Depot on 5600 West and 7800 South. So some of the changes that we made since particularly the joint work session between the City Council and Planning Commission were kind of the area over on the west side of the city, the Highlands and the Jordan Hills Villages area. There's some desire expressed there to make sure that the map is accurately reflecting the density in those areas, and so we've updated that to reflect those changes and make that current. And the other major change over on the west side was the southwest quadrant. You can kind of see here on the map in the pink stripes. So that is kind of coming on the coattails of the new southwest quadrant mixed use zone that was adopted by the council back in July. And so this kind of establishes the vision for that area and kind of the boundaries that we're looking to do there. And then finally, this is kind of more of a question for the council, but I'll zoom in here so you can see it a little better. But on the corner of 9000 South and 4000 West, there's a question to potentially change that ball camp property to medium density residential to kind of match the neighborhood to the east. Or the other option is to leave it as is. So it'd be great to get some feedback on that and see what you'd like to do there.
So we'll hold off on feedback until after we've had the public hearing, but I do see a couple lights that have gone up.
Chair, I just want to explain why that ask is there. So would you rather have that after?
I think it's okay to explain why the ask. So if there's anybody from the public who wants to weigh in on that, they can weigh in on it too. But yeah.
Okay. So the purpose for this ask is this neighborhood that is medium density. It was built prior to Bangerter Highway being a highway and now a freeway. And so there is only two ingress egress. So two streets that exit off to 90th South. While Ball Camp usually is a good neighbor, there have been times when it just hasn't been a compatible use, and thankfully the city, the economic development team has been good at interfacing and helping resolve issues. But the ask is there that should Ball Camp leave, that could be turned into medium density residential with a road that could then help this neighborhood get out onto 4000 West. The problem is it's so close to a freeway exit that it's dangerous to get in and out many times during the day. And behind there, that solid line is tracks. So this neighborhood is boundaried by tracks, Bangerter Highway, 9000 South, which is a UDOT road, so the city doesn't really have much say, and then 4000. So the ask is there to help in the future maybe get those residents out in a more safe manner. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, that was pretty much it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. We'll go for questions from Councilmember Pack.
Yes, thank you. Just a question for clarification, not so much discussion, if that's all right, Chair. Okay, thank you. The only comment that I had from a resident is by the Maples going to a medium density, that the rationale behind that, in conversation with Councilmember Jacob, there's an assumption that it's a little more north, please.
North of Maple Hills.
There's an assumption that it's by the freeway and the adjacent areas are medium density. Just curious if you're aware of any other rationale behind a change there.
Are you talking about the change from future part to medium density?
Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
That was kind of discussed in the last work session that we did, and so originally this was kind of a large regional park here, and some of the feedback that we got was that a lot of the emphasis was kind of shifting more towards Ronwood Park, particularly for the west side. So the idea was to, I guess there wasn't a whole lot, it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of desire to have a park there, particularly with the new Maple Hills Park going in. And so the idea was really to just kind of expand the medium density residential and kind of match what was around it. So you can kind of see here, there's medium density on the east side of Mountain View corridor and then on the west of that park area.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thanks. Can you go just a little south of here, down toward the Oaks right there? That white spot in the middle. It says low and medium density residential to park and open lands on a neighborhood that's currently being built as low and medium density residential.
Yeah, that's a typo.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is that supposed to say? Planned
So that-
community or something else?
That should be medium density resident, or actually that might be low.
A lot of that.
Yeah,
is-
because a lot of those are the larger symphony homes that
Right.
are going in
Yeah,
there.
in
So
fact, that whole white area is low. So
yes, yeah. So that's
Okay.
that's correct. I believe that's staying as is. So
yeah, I
I
was
think the
wondering about
label's
that.
just
I
a
was
typo.
like, gonna tear down a bunch of brand new $1 million houses. And
Yeah,
put in a
no,
park?
that is not the intent.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions for staff before we open the public hearing? Any other comments from staff?
I have a few more, if you'll entertain them.
Okay.
Okay, Alan, will you pull up the next slide for me? So a couple things I wanted to review about the text of the plan as well is something I noticed in the old plan that I wanted to bring in the new plan as the committee wrote the plan is that there's really this big emphasis on sustainability. And I think that's the goal of a general plan, right? Is to create a sustainable direction for the city. So we've highlighted that within the general plan. We've also done a lot to make the general plan more friendly and accessible for readers. And we've done this by adding images that really show off West Jordan. To the next slide. This is one of my favorite ones that I feel like really just shows off West Jordan, what a beautiful place it can be in our events. And then we've also taken the graphs and made them a little bit more friendly for reading and a little bit more modern. So we've taken two graphs and turned them into one by talking about household income and per capita income as well as poverty levels. So this is easy for people to access as they're trying to learn more about the city compared to others. We've also made it so we can take certain elements of the general plan out and replace them. If you remember earlier this year, we had to adopt the moderate income housing plan with our old general plan as a document together to satisfy state requirements. And if Alan, you move on to the next page. So what we've done is we've kind of created banners on the side of these chapters. So what we can do is as we create new plans each year and as are required for us, we can pull them out, we can recolor the banner and say, okay, this is the 2024 plan, this is the 2025 plan, and then we can create a chapter at the end of the general plan that has our historic plans. So that's another thing we've added as well, just to try and make a general plan that is easy for readers. And we've also separated out water, which isn't required to do annually yet, but you never know. It seems to be like an important topic at the legislature. But those were the last couple of comments I wanted to add. I have several follow-up questions, but we'll wait for those after the public hearing, if that's okay. Oh, and I did social media outreach, and so did the city. So we have hit both the city council Facebook page and the city hall page. Marie did a great job at creating some public outreach as well. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware of the outreach that we had done thus far.
All right. The follow-up questions we're going to hold until after the public comment. But are there any other questions before we open the public hearing? All right. Not seeing any, we'll now open the public hearing. Can we jump over to the slide to remind me what the key combination is for those who are participating by phone?
Star 6 and Star 9.
So star 6 if you're participating by phone. No, star 9 if you're participating by phone and would like to speak to the general plan. Hit star 9. We'll know that you want to speak to that. If you're here in person, please come up to the dais, or to the podium. All right, I am not seeing any hands raised online. Oh, I do see one, Ms. Framo. Let me open it up so that you can speak. You should now be able to press star 6 to unmute, and you can have 3 minutes to speak in our public hearing regarding the general plan. looks like you're there almost. It looks like you're not quite unmuted. So *6 to unmute, Ms. Efremo, and you should be good to speak. Okay, I'm not seeing it come unmute. So I do see your hands up. *6 should unmute, and then we can start your 3 minutes. There we go. Okay, it looks like you're unmuted now. We should be able to hear you. Oh, and you just got muted again. Okay, we'll try one more time. *6 to unmute. We'll let you speak about the general plan. There we go. Okay, you're unmuted.
I wanted us to please take a little bit of time to count our blessings here in West Jordan. We are so blessed with all our blessings. But anyway, I want to say we have the best mayor in the USA. This horrible snowstorm. I live in a cul-de-sac, and they hired a small truck to come in, and he did a terrible job of removing snow. So God bless Mayor Burton. He came after 5 o'clock with his truck and his shovel, and he took the shovel and he removed all the snow from in front of my neighbor's driveway. It was terrible. We need to do more on having 3 feet of snow in front of the mailbox. I want us to please, I know you hired a small little truck, but he did a terrible job. Anyway, God bless you all. Merry Christmas. I read an article that said we should continue Christmas every day of the year. So Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ms. Efremo, thank you for sharing your comments. Is there anybody else online or in person who would like to address the council? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and Councilmember Green.
I'm just getting my light ready.
Okay. I'm going to throw out a quick question to the council because we may want to take a slight deviation. We called an audible. I suggested calling an audible by moving our legislative update a little bit later into the meeting, and I've been given an update that
We still are in the public hearing, right?
we closed the public
Did you
hearing.
say closed? Okay, I missed it, sorry.
Yeah. So we can return to the council now for discussion on this, or we'd called an audible where we moved the legislative update to later in the meeting. I've been informed that there's a hard stop on Ms. Barker's time. She wasn't planning on doing it a little bit later in the meeting. So if we want to get that update, we can go to her now, or we can have that in our workshop next week.
I prefer it now.
We don't have time in the workshop next time. There's too many items on the agenda.
So I would look for a motion from the I would move to take the items out of the order on the agenda to accommodate necessary modifications.
Second.
Motion by Chair McConaughey, second by Councilmember Whitelock. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, so we'll come back to the council's discussion on the general plan in a few moments, and instead we will turn a little bit of time over to Ms. Barker, which, interestingly enough, many of the items addressed in the general plan are also covered by changes in the legislature. So, yeah, yep, Ms. Barker.
Well, I think I have some good news for you tonight. So hopefully we won't have to make too many updates. I'm going to start with just talking about the number of bills filed in this last legislative session. There were 929 bills filed. Councilmember Whitelock was correct in saying there were over 500 that passed. It was 575, which is a record number for our legislature. Record number of bills filed, record number of bills passed. I thought you would be really interested to know that the legislator that filed and passed the most bills is our own Senator Harper, followed up secondarily by our own Senator Fillmore. So we're contributing heavily to those numbers. The last week of the session, I thought this was also very interesting. The last week of the session, the legislature passed double the number of bills on average daily than they have ever done in a previous year, which meant that a lot of the bills didn't get discussed very broadly on the public, out in front of the public. So that obviously impacts our ability to do work. But we tracked over 200 bills. I am happy to report that we've already done our legislative wrap up with the administration, and we've made assignments for follow up on those bills and any necessary work moving forward. I'm also happy to let you know that most of the bills that were passed will largely affect administrative operations. So there will probably be pretty limited impacts to city legislative ordinances and things like that. So I don't anticipate that you'll have some, but not a ton of updates this year, which is good news. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the public funding that was either we received this year or that kind of impacted the city. And I'm going to start with Senate Bill 2. And I hope this comes as a pleasant surprise because we didn't talk about it much as we were leading up to this. But in Senate Bill 2, the city of West Jordan received $4 million for road construction. We were one of 3 cities to receive transportation funding this year, and we received the largest amount. So really happy to report back that we have some money that will help with our capital projects. And this money will help to extend 8600 South out to U111. So this will be a big improvement project for those new homes that are going to be start being built out there. So there's more than one access point. So some great news for the city. We also are kind of receiving by way of SB 23, which was traffic safety amendments. It doesn't come to our city, but this bill paved the way for funding of additional safety officers for state roads. The appropriation that we received and we fought for hard this year was to cover and facilitate highway patrol on Bangerter Highway. We anticipate next year going back to the legislature with a study and asking for money to facilitate that same public safety effort on Mountain View Corridor. So those bills passed. We also saw the passage of several outdoor recreation bills that we supported and will be able to tap into for trails and parks funding. We're watching all of those closely. They'll now go into the rule-making sessions, and we think there's probably in the neighborhood of $500,000 worth of funding that our city can tap into in the next year through those bills. And then we also saw the expansion of a new fund within the TIF that will go ahead and contribute to active transportation, bike lanes, and trails and things like that. And we're also anticipating being able to tap into that as early as next year. We also saw the passage of SB 75. This was the sand and gravel sales tax amendments. This was a very controversial bill because it completely readjusts the way the sales tax formula works. The good news for our city is that while many cities are losing significant funding through this, we're going to stay about flat because we do have 2 gravel pits in the city. The money that we receive through this that'll be reallocated to our city flat with maybe a little bit of extra. And that little bit of extra will be dedicated to Class B and C road fund projects. So we have a little bit of money there. We also saw the passage of Senate Bill 260, transportation funding requirements. This came right down to the last minute, really. We were pushing this one all the way to the end of the day on Friday. This is the bill that paved the way for the 5th of the 5th. This will give us additional money to our city to the tune of $1.3 to $1.7 million. It does need to pass the county council. We do understand that based on our conversations, the mayor is willing to take that to the council, and we believe we do have the votes for that to pass at this time. So we anticipate that that funding will start coming to the city probably sometime in the next fiscal year. I'm so excited to be able to bring that money to the city. And boy, that one was a fight. It came out through 2 bills, and we weren't quite sure if we were going to pull it out in the end, but it worked out, and that's going to be some nice extra money that will help defray the costs to our residents, the costs of inflation and things of that nature. And one of the reasons that we really supported this type of funding and this type of a tax, it's really hard to ever talk about increasing taxes. But when you're looking at sales tax or property tax, it's much easier for, my parents to decide I'm not going to buy this at Target today, then I'm not going to pay my property tax. And so that's where the support on this one came from. The next thing that I wanted to mention to you was the passage of House Bill 499. This is the Homeless Services Amendments. This largely affects our administrative operations, but I did want to tell you about the funding side because it does affect the city. We were able to work in a definition that would help the formula. They increased the cap on the formula, which would have had us paying about $100,000 more. We got language inserted into the bill that takes into consideration South Valley Services as a potential homeless facility, and our contribution increase will drop down to about between $30,000 and $45,000. So the formula is quite complex now, but that complexity has helped our city. I will continue to participate on behalf of the city on the Homeless Services Council for Salt Lake County, and happy to give you updates in the future. A couple public safety bills that I just wanted to make mention. Most of the public safety bills are largely administrative, changes to training, things that will happen at posts, things that will happen outside of our city. There are a few administrative things that will create a little bit more work for our officers, I think, which will affect workload. But the things that will largely affect our city was our H Bill 59, which was first responder mental health amendments. You'll remember last year the legislature passed this bill that extended mental health benefits to retired officers. The amendment is to extend that same benefit to spouses of retired officers, which was the intent of the first bill. So this was a little bit of cleanup. It's likely to cost the city a little bit of money. Denise could probably tell you, I don't think we're providing benefits. I don't think we have retirees that are currently taking us up on these benefits. So right now the cost is zero. That could impact the city in the future. The second is HB 183. This one is firefighter retirement amendments. This allows us, again, no cost to the city, but it's something that allows us to potentially tap into new recruiting. This bill allows the city to provide paramedic or med techs with firefighter retirement system benefits. So should the city, right now we don't have plain paramedics or med techs, they're all firefighters, but if we wanted to go that direction for recruiting and human resources purposes, that's something we can now tap into as a city, which is another great tool that we have in our arsenal. We talked about a lot of public safety bills that were going to cost us money. None of those bills passed. And that was a lot of work, with all of the cities, a lot of work with a lot of the work with the league and with others at the county level. I do want to touch on HB 210, just to give you a heads up. This is the Justice Court bill. This starts the 3 to 4 year transition that will move courts from justice courts to a magistrate court, which will be similar to a district court. It's likely the way that this will impact the city in the long term is that we will be prosecuting more misdemeanors, and we will need to hire additional prosecutorial staff in the future. This bill is really just the start of that, and right now won't have a financial impact or really an operational impact on our court system, but that's something that we'll probably have to start looking at in the second half of 2024. We anticipate phase 2 bills will be introduced and will pass in the 2024 legislative session, and then the remainder of that change will likely take place in 2025, kind of depending on how much money they want to spend. Last but not least, I want to talk about some of the land use bills. We had a number this year that will impact the city. I'm going to kind of mention them by name, but I'm going to talk about them all at the same time because they all kind of go hand in hand. At least the first three. HB 364, which was housing affordability amendments, HB 406, which was land use development and management act modifications, and Senate Bill 174, which was the local land use development revisions. These bills largely cover the moderate income housing plan. It was amendments to last year's bill. So the things that this kind of specifically that I want to call out in this is how we do our reporting deadline, which has been set at August 1st. Once the report is turned in, if for some reason the Department of Workforce Services doesn't accept it, there is a 90-day cure period. That's something we didn't have this last year as cities. So the 90-day cure period has been set up, and then if for some reason we're unable to cure our report in 90 days or they don't accept it, there is an appeal process, which includes a representative from the League of Cities and Towns. And so we have some opportunities there. If a city were to lose the appeal process, there is a $250 a day fine paid to the Olin Walker Housing Fund. I don't anticipate that we'll ever have to use any of this, which is great, but I want to make sure you're aware. It also touched on IADUs, some very simple clarifications. The first being a garage unit is considered an IADU for the definition of IADUs for municipalities, and it also covered parking. Essentially the adjustment was a city may allow one additional parking space up to 4. So if we've already requested 4 for that property, we can't request another just because they have an IADU. And then the final piece, which is really the big bear of a piece, was the subdivision approval process. A number of changes here. They follow largely some processes that we're already doing in our city. I'm sure Scott will have a lot of work ahead to implement the final things, but largely what this does is it sets up a subdivisional approval process that's the same in every single city. Cities are allowed 15 business days for preliminary approval processes and 20 for final approval processes. Really, that's kind of the gist of it. I think it's largely administrative changes. I don't see any ordinance or any legislative changes as a result of these bills. And then the last land use piece that I wanted to let you know about is SB 199, which was local land use amendments. And this bill is particularly important to you as this is a bill that stops referendums on a unanimous vote. So if you vote unanimously, it is not open to public referendum. And I think that's really important for you guys to understand as you move forward with land use decisions. So those are really the large bills that will affect this legislative body and may affect the budget in the city. You'll just remember we talked about so many bills that were going to cost us a lot of money, and most of those have gone away. So this might be a little bit more death by 1,000 cuts, but it's certainly not large amounts that we were talking about during the session. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the session or any of these bills or any bills that I may not have mentioned.
We'll start questions with Councilmember Green.
So on Senate Bill 174, why don't you think that that's going to require codification in city code?
174?
Senate Bill 174 and all the subdivision stuff.
The IADU piece might, Scott, I would look to you or Duncan, I'm not really sure.
I would think that most of that's going to require codification of some sort. No?
I don't.
mean, we just can't say, well, we're going to do it. We do it this way, so that's the way the law is.
We're still unpacking, and I've got it in my hand actually. Tani is right. A lot of it is administrative, but we will go through, and Duncan and I are going to be going through it in detail. And you're right. If there is a code amendment, we will be bringing it.
When I read it, I've read it a couple of times trying to sort it out and actually figure out what they were talking about. It seemed like there was a bunch of that stuff that's going to have to be codified in our development process, but I could be wrong.
Thanks, Councilmember. One thing that will be coming up is the league will be setting up their training meetings that will talk about which items need to be codified, which items they anticipate will need to become a part of municipal code. Right now, based on their discussion, they think it's pretty limited. There could be some things we haven't caught yet, and I think that's why we're doing our due diligence and why on Tuesday we had our administrative meeting and made assignments for staff members and really legal counsel to start the in-depth review on these pieces at this time.
Just a couple of things for me. HB 22, was it HB 22? I can't, hold on, let me make sure. HB 22 you think that the legislature's got something better to do than worrying about local boards versus special district. But that modification to the ordinance is already in PrimeGov, and Senate Bill 170, whatever it was, that changed the alcohol. You think that the legislature would just leave the alcohol laws alone for at least a week.
They
But
made some slight adjustments there
they
to
made
the
some
definition.
adjustments, but that's
yeah.
gonna have to change. So I've already reached out to Scott, and we'll start taking a look at what we've got to do to add that to Title 18.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think Duncan is already looking at that, right? Yeah, so I think we'll be prepared to answer questions soon.
Any other questions from the council? There appear to be none.
Thank you for your time. I
Ms. Barker.
appreciate it.
All right, and thank you to the council for flexibility and adjusting to make sure that we had sufficient time for Ms. Barker. Let's now return to the conversation about the general plan. And Cassidy, you had a couple follow-up questions. Do you want to take a moment or two before council jumps into it? I know there's a couple that are already revving their lights ready to go, but we'll give you first crack.
I am looking forward to hearing what you have to say. These are just some questions that I would like to have answered by tonight because it helps provide staff a direction of where to go next. So it's really up to you as council members if you want to discuss the plan now, because you might have discussion on the plan and then that might be sufficient for these questions, if that makes sense. Like, I'm at a loss of where to go, but I'm excited that we're on this adventure together.
All right, Councilmember Green, do you have specific questions? Because if you do, we can hit those and then we can come back to Cassidy's, and then after Cassidy's, we can kind of open up to open forum wherever the council would like to go within the plan. Or,
I'll wait.
all right, we'll start with these questions. If you want to just walk us through. For the sake of efficiency, as we're walking through this part of the meeting, I don't necessarily want to have to recognize each person one by one, so feel free, council, to chime in as she asks questions and just instantly respond. Hopefully that'll save us a few moments. So Cassidy, please.
Great. Let's start with the first question. Do you feel like there's been adequate public outreach on the general plan in its creation and where we're at currently?
I think on the creation, yes, but I think there's changes, and I don't know. I think one more public hearing wouldn't hurt after the council has had time to have a deeper dive into it and make any suggestions. As far as goals, I think there are too many. And when I look at it and say, okay, there's all these goals, but who's responsible? How are we going to track them? And before I say yes to the plan, I kind of want to know those things.
And I was just gonna say no, but then there never will be. It'll never be adequate. I mean, we can try and try and try and try, and it's not gonna be enough. So the effort has been adequate, yes.
I'm with Councilmember Whitelock on the number of goals. I think that we need to look at the goals. They need to be specific, measurable, realistic, attainable. If somebody can smell smart, there should be a SMART goal. We should have, the goals should be there, and maybe even some why do we want, but I think we need to look at those again. Am I interested? I don't know. Are we going through all these questions or just the?
Well, we'll let her hit them one by one.
Okay.
I know on the first one, I think I agree that there's been a good attempt at public outreach, but I also don't want this to be a one and done. I think that with some of the timing as we're wrapping this up during some of the winter months, I mean, we were seeing snow outside the window just a few minutes ago. Not everybody gets information from the city the same way. I'm pretty sure that's what the survey that you just spoke about is going to do, and I'm sure we'll have information about better public outreach soon. There's a really good comment that I got. I don't want to call out Mr. Davenport or let his head get too big, but I thought he brought up a fantastic idea in a one-on-one conversation before the meeting where he was suggesting that, hey, couldn't we do something like maybe a booth with our Western Stampede where we have let people know what's going on and where they can have their thoughts shared. I'm hoping that we have something adopted prior to that, but I would love to see us continue the outreach so that we're ready next time things need to be updated. Or if we get some really good ideas that should be brought in sooner, we can just do it. So I'd like to see that outreach become more of a part of day-to-day life within the city. So for the purposes of what we're doing now, yeah, I think we're okay. But I don't want to stop after we say, okay, it's good, and put it away.
Great, thank you. Yes, I was contacted by a resident after City Council took action on an item that he wasn't aware was even an issue. And the question that was posed to me is, well, where can I go to get information on what's going on, not only with general plan, but just what's going on in the city? And so thankfully I was able to network with our council office and the mayor's office, and I was able to get back to this resident talking about, well, you can check out our Facebook page or our website, also the West Jordan Journal. I think the more avenues we have at advertising, the better. We're talking about public outreach. It seems that different people like to be communicated with in different ways. So the more channels we could have, I think would help, so that we can cast our net a little wider and make sure that people feel informed. And so that's just what I would mention. I know when I contact my grandma, she wants a handwritten note, not a text. So, just different generational ideas or different demographics of how to communicate with the population. Thank you.
Did that give you what you need on that first one?
Yes, that is perfect. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on. The next three questions go all together, and we're going to get into the goals where we talk about, are you comfortable with the number of the goals? Should we cut some? Are there any goals missing? This isn't just like throwing stuff on the wall. This is, hey, I noticed that we don't have a policy on this within the general plan, or this wasn't addressed as sufficiently as I would have liked. I would like to propose a goal that says, let's investigate this policy so we don't have to spend time writing another chapter. We just can focus on that as we do our next iteration of the general plan. And then it also talks about, what do we want to do with the goals to implement them? As I've been talking with several members of the council and with staff members as well, some of the goals that are within the plan are in the plan to help show other entities that we're working on these goals, right? So there's some things in that plan that those are more like day-to-day goals. Those are things we do every day as they show up in the city, versus creating something or implementing a policy, if that makes sense. So another option is we can separate those out so they're easier to look at and say, like, hey, here are things that we do all the time and we continue to do them and we want to continue to support these goals, versus these are things that will change the direction of our city. So that's kind of the discussion I'm looking for you as a council, I guess, is talking about those three questions.
So here's a couple of my thoughts. One, we need to have a set of goals that when a development comes in front of us, we can say, is it meeting these goals or not? And if it's not if it meets 7 out of 10, it meets 23 out of 30, okay, it's good enough. If it meets 2 out of 20, then maybe we ought to say, no, this doesn't meet the general plan. So we really need to have the goals defined of what do we want the city to look like, but we also need to, and there are some that we are trying to justify to other agencies. We won't say workforce services and the Utah legislature and those kind of people to do what we're doing, but are those goals, are they reporting? And third, I think that somewhere along the line, there are some goals that we need to figure out where we want to be as a city. For example, and this is one I will use, is in the general plan, do we have a section that is good enough on agricultural preservation? And then that leads to the second part, do we want to look as a council that start talking about transfer rights? Well, transfer rights may, like you have there, need some fiscal support, but it may not. But we need to look in depth at something like transfer rights so that we can protect the agricultural zones and trade that for maybe higher density someplace else. Ray's shaking his head, so at least somebody understands what I'm talking about. But that's where I wanted to go, is maybe not just 2, but 3. Here's the day-to-day reporting stuff. Here's the stuff that we want to look at when we're looking at, land use decisions in the city. And then 3, ones that need to have more council emphasis, more administrative emphasis through the plan. Things like community gardens and transfer rights and all those other kinds of things that we're not doing now that would improve the community or maintain the community.
Any other comments to those 3 questions on goals?
So I have a follow-up question. Are there enough council members, are there 4 council members that are invested in having staff put in the time to separate those out? I don't think you necessarily need to separate them out within the general plan. I think that's confusing for the public in the terms of a document. But for example, Councilmember Green, if we had a list that popped up within your RCA that has the questions when it comes to land use, would that be helpful? And is that a post task of adopting the general plan versus we do this before?
I'm looking for the general plan for dummies version.
Okay.
Literally on some of this, what I'm looking for is a general plan for dummies that it may be a cheat sheet derived from the general plan that says these are the goals, and then we have them in a consolidate, there are goals throughout the general plan, but I'm not going to go through a 300-page general plan every time there's a land use development that comes up in the city. I want the goals on a sheet of paper that I can go down and say, does this land use, here's all the goals we want. Which ones does it meet? Which ones doesn't? Which ones are more important to me? So that when it comes to making a decision about whether the development meets the intent of the general plan, we can say, yeah, we've checked off 15. No, we've checked off 2. And that would probably also provide something better for the planning commission, so that when they start looking at it and they have those legislative discussions that they ought to be, that they can have the reasonable discussions about whether or not it meets the requirements of the general plan, because that's their job, and it needs to be something that they can go through and say, does it meet the general plan or not, without having to go through 300-page general plan every time we turn around.
Thank you. Yes, it brings up a good point on, I really enjoyed when I served on Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment, how with each application there were many references to, does this fit the intent of the general plan? And you'd have 4 or 5 goals to ensure that it's consistent with the general plan. So understandably, if we have 30, 40 goals, it's hard to keep them all in mind. But I would definitely enjoy that format, as well as on the 4th bullet point, brainstorming with administration so that we don't presume that we know any better on what would be the most important prioritization than the people that are working in the trenches real time having to deal with these issues. So I think the more input we have, it's a better informed decision instead of a small group's individual guess. So yes, pre or post adoption, one time versus ongoing, and also having the goals in front of us that pertain to the application at hand, so that we don't have any unnecessary blind spots with decisions we're making for each application. Thank you.
I like the idea of having all of the goals kind of consolidated in one place, but at the same time, it loses a lot of nuance and background when that happens. but as was mentioned, I don't know how many times people are going to go through a 300-page document when they're making a land use decision. The thing that I worry about with having everything consolidated is the misunderstanding that people may not recall that these are aspirations and not requirements. And as we have a list of all the different goals, I mean, going away from 40, let's say we've got 3 goals. We want to be fast, and we want cheap, and we want high quality. Well, we're only going to get 2 of the 3. So I don't want people thinking, oh, well, we're missing one of these aspirations, therefore the entire thing needs to get thrown away. It's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for perfect world. There have been a lot of folks who spend a lot of time trying to think, what does perfect world look like? Where do we want to try to get to? Knowing that, yeah, some of these goals are aspirational. We're not going to hit every single one of them every single time. I just want to be very careful that we don't mistakenly represent that in our presentation to those decision makers in the future. And the perfect becomes the enemy of the good, and we find ourselves not progressing forward. I just want to be careful.
Couldn't we have both? Couldn't we have the goals throughout and then one page that you can just quickly look at?
Yeah, as long as it's presented in a way that doesn't give, as long as it's not presented in a way that steers people away from the intent, but also I don't want to give them a substitute for the general plan and have the general plan not actually be read by folks, because there's so much content there. I don't want people to go to just the goals and think, I don't need to read the whole document because these are my cliff notes.
So maybe the cliff notes are just for us.
So again, to argue what I was just saying a minute ago, we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. So yeah, maybe, I mean, we can do both. That help, or just kind of walk in circles?
It was very circular, but I think what I have from the
Clearly, you
council
haven't-
is they would like to be able to access the goals in a variety of ways that will help them make decisions. But I think you are correct in the sense of a lot of these goals are aspirational. And I think the reason why we are talking about goal organization is if you look at the last general plan, we don't really have a section in our current one that says, hey, this is what we did. This is how we achieved these goals, right? That's something I wish we had in our new general plan, but it takes a lot of work to keep track of that, and it takes dedicated staff and kind of a procedure to do that as you have staff turnover over the course of the years. So I think balancing that as well, and I think that's like another overarching goal that we have with the organization of the goals. But it sounds like that there's enough support to go ahead and put the goals in a variety of format that is helpful. And it seems like the council is okay with that happening as we're working on adopting it and eventually adopting the plan. It's just a big task, so I just want to talk timeline.
Some of the, as we're talking about the cheat sheet, whatever you want to call this, we've got to be able to, and I think that what you just said is very important, is that we have to be able to capture when or if we approve a project, we need to capture which ones of the general plan did this meet? Which ones do we say, no, we killed the project because of this one, or we used 7 of them and we approved it, so that we can keep track of which items as we look over the long term. If there are goals, let's just hypothetically say there's a goal that over the course of 18 months never is used in the city, then the question would be, if we haven't used it for 18 months or 2 years, is that goal valid, and should we drop it? We need to have some sort of data tracking measure that just just says, you know what, we did that. Here's our goals in a spreadsheet. And even if we just put developments in different columns and we click on the ones that we used, at some point in time, we should be able to do some data analysis to say, this goal was useless. Why do we continue putting it in a general plan? This goal has been used 150 times. That one's obviously important. Do we need to strengthen that? You know where I'm going is that we've got to be able to have that long-term trackable piece of the goal. If we're just going to say, well, it's there, it's not doing us any good for the long term for the city. You know what I mean?
I noticed Councilmember Bloom came off mute. Did you want to chime in?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just listening to Calvin, and I agree a lot with what he says with those goals. Yeah, I'm still formulating my thoughts. Give me a second.
No worries. I'll keep an eye on the participants panel so you can mash
Okay.
the raise hand. And in fact, if you hit it a couple times so it's kind of blinking at me, I might see it a little
Oh,
more quickly.
okay. I'll message you too if you can't see me.
Okay, so I think I understand the expectation and what the council would like to see in the future, and I'm excited about that. But let's talk, do you want to see that post-adoption of the plan? Do you want to see that before we adopt the plan? How do you want to go about this?
What's realistic, Cassidy? Because sure, it would be great to have it before, but that may not be realistic with what you have on your plate.
That's a great point. I have started organizing the goal and I've put them in Trello and I've created a system for them. So they're at least within a system. Managing that system in a way that's helpful toward you guys will take a little bit of time. But I also think I once had a professor say a deadline is sometimes the greatest act of mercy. So I think setting a deadline is good for that. If you decide to adopt the plan and say, hey, we'd love to see this system turned around in X amount of months, then I will make that happen. But I would like an expectation so we don't just adopt the plan and say, oh yeah, just get that when you have a chance.
Okay, Ms. Hanson, can I see that next week?
Good thing you don't pay me overtime, I suppose. I prefer not, but
I'm okay with it post-adoption as long as it's reasonable after that so that we have the tools that we need to do the job that we need to. So yeah, I'd be good with a post-adoption with a good deadline.
Same. Post-adoption allows us an opportunity to try and meet my goal of making this a more relevant, active document that's more regularly referenced. Gives us more time to get it in front of more people. But it also gives us an opportunity to take all of the fantastic work that's been done and put it in place now. One of my frustrations earlier in my time on the council was that we have a general plan, future land use map at the time that had been drawn up before Mountain View Corridor was completed, and a lot had changed in the city, and it become very static and stagnant. Post-adoption lets us try and breathe life and keep things moving.
okay, let's move on to the final question. Do you want to have a full work session on the general plan or a special meeting to discuss the plan in depth? We haven't really gone into content tonight. And so I see a nod from Councilmember Whitelock. I see a nod from Councilmember Green. I see nodding from Councilmember Jacob.
So the corresponding question, though, that goes along with this is going to be timing.
Right.
During administrative items at the end, I was going to show tentatively what we're planning on for our next work session. Our subsequent council meeting this month, likely has an RDA afterwards. Next month, we don't have a work session because of ULCT. The next month during May, we'll be involved in the budgeting process. We'll have a little bit of time in June. We'll have everything going on in July with those festivities. So if we do want to have a full work session, what's your appetite for either an extra meeting or timing, or
so if we did it in April, it wouldn't necessarily be an extra meeting. It would just be holding the meeting just on a different day, right? So I'd be okay to do it in April if there's a day that we could find consensus for.
Yes, thank you. Happy to meet with whatever we need to do. I know that one person's in-depth discussion is another person's glossy overview. And I did have the privilege of serving on general plan for the one-year appointment that lasted 3 years, right? You know how that goes. And so I want to be careful also that we don't micromanage the wonderful work that's gone into this. They've had the in-depth, tedious discussions, so I certainly do want to check it out. You always want to, have due diligence. But when it says in-depth, sometimes we mince over every line item. So maybe that could be a short conversation on if we're talking about taking each section and we're staying here all night, or so certainly happy to meet. I just also want to be respectful of the work that's already gone into creating the document. And also, when you try to have an alternate date than a Wednesday that you're usually meeting, I've found it's hard to herd cats and get everybody together.
Our general plan committee has done a great job. It's taken way too damn long, by the way, but that was because of COVID and some other things. And Ray just didn't want to get it done. I know I'm just giving you a hard time, Ray. I'm glad you could take a joke. He's laughing. But at the end of the day, we have to adopt it. And we've got to do the appropriate diligence that we're going to adopt. And if that means that we have to have a meeting, then we need to have a damn meeting. And it just... Kayleen's right. We can have a separate meeting in April. Doesn't have to be on the Wednesday night prior to ULCT, or that week of ULCT. We can still have a meeting in April. We'd still have a meeting. I'm not going to wait until, we don't want to wait until August to approve this, because then it would have been 3 years, almost 3 years to get a general plan complete. And I don't want to wait that long. We've got to have a vision for the city, and if we're not willing to spend the time on the city, then why are we even here?
Well, I don't think I heard anyone say they weren't willing to spend the time. In fact, it sounded like everyone's in favor. So if you could consider potential dates for that, we can hit on that during administrative items at the end of the meeting to find a time for that. What's coming to my mind right now is potentially like a Thursday after the first, for me, a Thursday after one of the Wednesday council meetings in April would be my personal preference, but just something to consider. We can come back to that in administrative items later tonight. Ms. Hanson.
Perfect. And for that review, I was thinking what we would end up doing is going chapter by chapter, similar to how the Planning Commission did. And the biggest question is going to be, do you have any misgivings? It's not, I would like this sentence to be worded this way instead of the way that it is. It's more, do you have any major misgivings? Do you have 4 members, or I guess, are there 4 of you in total who agree with that misgiving? Let's correct. Not let's redo everything that the committee has already done. So just to give you an idea of what I was hoping for.
Yeah, and when we do have that conversation, I'd like to make sure there's an invitation extended to Mr. Lively, Mr. Rudy, Mr. Wilson, so that they can be there. And I actually like that idea of a forum a little bit better, because it gives us more interaction, where right now it's not quite as communicative of a forum. So I would like to make sure that they're there, and any other members of the General Plan Committee who are able to attend, but especially those 3. And thank you for sticking it out with us this far tonight.
Excellent. And then we'll set that up as a committee of the whole. I don't think I have any further questions for tonight.
Councilmember Whitelock's item that she brought up earlier, Mr. Forsyth, you had on the map the question about that one parcel. Is that something that we can get kind of would it be helpful to have a preliminary council feeling on that particular item right now?
Can I jump in here?
Please, Councilmember.
I don't want either or. There's maybe some commercial property right on the corner that matches the commercial property on all 4 other corners, but maybe there's half that property that ought to go to medium density, so that there can be a road that goes out to 40th West if Ball Camp decides to go. I'm not, like I said, I don't want to. I want to be about as consistent as I've been on the council. I hate giving up commercial property. And right on the corner may be a good may be good for some sort of commercial property, but the rest of the property that gives an out to 40th West may work. So that would be my thought is pull King Solomon and pull the sword out and split the baby, instead of an all or nothing proposition. That's where I would stand on that.
Well, and I would say that you don't necessarily need to change a future land use map or change a zoning or change anything to put a road. There are roads that go right through the middle of commercial zones all over the place.
This commercial zone, the building pretty much takes up.
Right, but we're talking about hypothetically if they leave.
Right.
So if they leave, you can replace it with replace one big building commercial area with two small building commercial areas and a road between them.
Yeah, you could.
So you don't.
But you still have an incompatible use with industry right next to residential.
Commercial next to residential is all over the place. That's not.
Right. I wouldn't consider Ball Camp.
Well, again, we're talking about if they leave.
Yeah.
All of this is
right.
All of this is predicated on Ball Camp not being there.
You're right.
So whatever the future land use map is now, commercial, can still exist with a road through it. We just put it on the master transportation plan or the master whatever that we want a road going through that property if and when that property changes hands. We want a road, and if it's going to be redeveloped, we want a road through it. For the neighborhood, we want a road, and we put that on the master transportation plan. It doesn't matter what the zoning or what the thing is. A road. There's roads running through zones everywhere.
That's one way to do it.
So we may need to have a little bit more conversation on this one. The question that I have that's probably going to be a little bit more than we can answer in this forum is, what impact would a change have on them today? And if they were to go and sell the property, would us making modifications to the future land use map potentially adversely affect them when they go to sell, and bring in somebody who could come and use that a lesser caliber tenant that could retain the same zoning and be more problematic for the existing neighbors? I just want to make sure that we don't accidentally shoot ourselves in the foot. But like I said, that's probably a conversation for another time. So definitely interest in answering that question. And I didn't hear anybody say, let's just keep it as is. So.
One more thought. This is on the corner of 78 South and 13th West. It has community commercial as the future land use map, and then it goes behind two crappy old houses that stay residential, and then it goes around and community commercial about where Sprinkler Supply Company is. Those couple of little dumpy properties have got to be changed to community commercial. It's not on the map. It's got this little carve out. Let's just make the corner community commercial and make it simple. And if you need me to point it out on a map after the meeting, I can do that. But that's one of the ones that I think actually came up in the open house, and it's not on the current map. And I think we need to fix that one so that as the area is redeveloped, because that area should be ripe for redevelopment. It's Larry knows what I'm talking about with some of those houses and the eightplex across the street. Some of those that area is ripe for redevelopment. I know Councilmember Jacob has talked about some of the redevelopment along 78 South from Gardner Village and beyond, and that just needs to show as commercial. If we can do that, if you'll just make a note, maybe we can modify that and talk about that more when we go to approve the future land use map. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hanson, anything else on this one, or?
I'm set if Ray is okay with you moving on. Do you have everything you need, Ray? Okay, we're set.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our business items. We have a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign the grant agreement between The arts group. We'll look at Denise for this one. Ms. Steck.
Yet another item that's been a long time coming, right? We were having to wait until the ordinances were changed, which you changed your last meeting, so thank you. This resolution 2313 is asking for you to authorize the mayor to sign the grant agreement between the Cultural Arts Society of West Jordan and the city. This does not authorize any funding. This only authorizes the reporting and the request requirements for the society to ask for money each year. So the agreement is for 10 years of this process. It's not so much 10 years of funding or even funding to this particular agency overall, if you don't choose to. So it would be a 10-year agreement with this process. Exhibit A is their report to you annually. We're going with a calendar year because it tends to communicate better to the public in general, and it also falls within our budgeting requirements. So in March of 2023, so right now-ish, it will likely be a little late just because of this coming up late, but somewhere between now and May, the Art Society will come to us with a report of what they accomplished in 2022. So they're going to talk about calendar year 2022, and they're going to say, this is what we did, this is our performances, these were the months that we did them, these are our participation numbers, and these are our financials. So they will provide revenues and expenses. At that same time, they will also come to you and request funding for calendar year 2024. So they're going to look back and they're going to look forward. They'll be in their current year operating. In 2024, that funding would occur in July of 2023 and provide them funding for calendar year 2024. The request for a grant approval would be what we would put into our budget for 2024, and it would have an amount. It would have their grant, their ZAP grant application, so that you knew that they were going for some county additional funding. It would have a budget of their revenues and expenses that they expect for 2024 and their participation levels. So they would be doing two reports, one on the previous year, one on the next year. And one would be, here's what we did with your money, and the other would be, here's what we're requesting for the next year. So that's a process, and that's what this resolution would approve, and the mayor would sign. Again, their request for each year would come in 1 year at a time. Questions?
So I'm confused here.
Oh no.
If their funding for calendar year 2024 is given in July of 2023, we are not going to get an accountability for that money until March of 2025. Because
Correct.
It's for 2024, then it goes for the year, and so they have 2 years without accountability. Because they get the money in July of 20,
Or they can get the money in
well,
July. You authorize the money in July.
If we authorize the money, we can get they would get the money in July of 2023, and the soonest we would see a report on that money would be March of 2025.
But that money would be through December of 2024.
Right, but we wouldn't see. But
so you'd see the report back 3 months after they had a chance.
what they're going to be able to do is have money that we give them in July of 2023 that they can spend from July through January, and then January through December.
They should not be spending that money during the 6 months. That should be money that.
And then what I want to do is have something in there that says we will disperse that money after January 1st. If we grant the money, we will grant that in a calendar year, because it doesn't make sense to give them money and then say, well, you give it to us in July of 2023, and the first time that they account for that money is almost 2 years later. That doesn't make sense to me. And so either we grant the money in January of 2024, or we have to do something different, because that just doesn't make sense to me.
It's difficult because our fiscal year is a little different. So You're authorizing the money in July of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. You can change the reporting year, but it does make it much more difficult for a report to come back when it's not on a calendar year.
Well, but all we have to do is just not disperse the money until January.
Yes, and you can authorize, that and tell me.
We can put it in the budget, but we just say it's not
not to be
authorized to be dispersed until January 1st.
You could actually put a note in the budget on the line item that would say, grant funding for the Cultural Arts Society to be dispersed January 1st. And then when you approve the budget, that note's in there.
I would be more comfortable with that then. Okay.
Yeah, that really doesn't need to be in this agreement per se, but we could make that a budget process for sure.
Councilmember Pack, and then
Oh.
I'll chime in.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment, Councilmember Green. I see what you're getting at. Also, I guess it would depend on if the Cultural Arts Society has any programming in store for January and February, because there's usually at least a 3-month lead time to get a production ready to go on. So I can see that being a potential problem just in the first year. If we're going to do this year after year, it can be.
I think it could be for any year, right? As accountants, we say, all right, if you're spending it in July, but you're not going to have the play occur until January, that would be a January expense, so to speak, but you're having to purchase rights early and scripts and get costumes ready and sets ready. So I think it just depends on the timing, but the activity should be funded for performances that occur during that time period.
Yes, thank you, because that's the other thing I was mentioning. For instance, right now in March, for a couple of theater groups I help, we need to buy rights and get things in place for next calendar year. So there really is quite a long lead time needed to have that funding.
But we don't intend to be their only funding source, so.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Nor should we worry about that.
Right.
This is their organization. We're giving them some grant. If they can't budget their money, that's their problem. We're there to do the accountability of the funds and make sure that the money's being spent.
Correct.
So my item is more of a formatting thing. But right now it's kind of broken apart into two places. Show us last year actual versus last year budget, and then show us next year what you're requesting. But we don't have anything for the current year. I'd love to see everything sort of in one big table saying, what did we have last year? What was last year's actuals, last year's budget? And then add, what is your forecast for this year? What do you think is going to happen this year? Because if next year, if they're planning bigger things, I'd like to see how they're bridging the gap between 2022 and 2024. What things are they planning to do in 2023? Where that current year, if I'm reading this right, we don't have that current year being captured in there. So I'd love to see all of those, right? Ideally side by side, but that's more of a formatting thing than anything for me. Just a thought. All right. Any other questions for the council or from the council? All right. This is brought to us as a potential resolution to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. Councilmember Whitelock.
So if you're ready, I'll make a motion. I move to approve resolution number 23-013, authorizing the mayor to sign the grant agreement with the Cultural Arts Society.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Whitelock, second by Councilmember Worthen. Any discussion to the motion? Councilmember Green.
I'm probably going to vote no. Just because, and this isn't against the Cultural Arts Society, but I incorporating this into the budget doesn't leave me the warm and fuzzies.
My question would be, by approving this resolution, would we be locked into this format for the next 10 years and not able to change, or could we make modifications?
I think that we could modify, or you could modify with the adoption of the resolution as well, if you're wanting to add a column for estimates. I think what we're trying to do is not get involved in their financial management overall. So their current year is kind of in flux in March. They've just barely started their current calendar year, so it's kind of tough for them to even estimate what would be going on at that point, which is why Councilman McConaughey or Chair McConaughey, that's exactly why I didn't leave it in there. We're just so early in their current year, it's tough to say.
And then I guess my other question, we talked about adding a line in the budget regarding disbursement. Is that line something that could potentially be added to this agreement? So it's clear in the agreement when disbursement occurs rather than relying on the note in
So
the budget?
I'm jumping in here. The terms, I'm going to paragraph 1 in the terms, and it specifically says, the city will distribute the grant amount, if any, upon written request at the beginning of the fiscal year or thereafter. The terms of the contract said they can request it and get it at the terms of the fiscal year,
Beginning of the fiscal
but
year.
they don't have to provide any accountability for 21 months afterwards, and I'm not comfortable with that. I'm just, the accountability has got to be from year to year, and we give them the money for fiscal year 24. We're not going to see a report in March of 2024 because we haven't given them any money. So if we budget money this July, the soonest we're going to see is a report in March of 2025, and I'm just not comfortable with that. And the terms of this contract specifically say that. And I didn't pick it up earlier. I would have submitted some stuff in writing, but I'm not comfortable distributing fiscal year and having a report turned in. I mean, if we want to do fiscal year and they can do, they get the money for 6 months and then turn a report in, that's great. But if we're talking about getting money in July of 2023 and not having to turn a report into 2025, there's no way I'm going to support this. That's just that to me that just doesn't work.
We've already given them money, so I would think that they'd give us this report.
They have not asked for the money yet for fiscal year 23.
Okay.
Paul's got his.
I think if you look at line 1, when it says the city will distribute the grant amount, if any, gives the city leeway each year if they decide to, not to approve it for that year.
You get closer to the mic.
If they decide not to approve it for that year, they would be allowed under the terms of the agreement because it does specifically state, if any. Maybe it could be reworded to make it more clear, but I do believe that gives it the leeway to.
But it says we'll distribute the grant if we budget the amount. That if any is a clause that says if we budget the amount, then they get it the beginning of the fiscal year.
They would get
And
funding.
that's where I'm uncomfortable with that because we don't have to budget it, but if we budget it, then all of a sudden they get that the first of the fiscal year, and it's a funky cycle. So I can't live with that term. I just can't.
So speaking to the motion, I very much want to vote in favor of the agreement, but I do want to see a modification made to the language here where it talks about the date of distribution. I would feel comfortable voting in favor of a motion that asks for this language to be adjusted and then brought back on consent on our next agenda. But as it stands right now, I think I'm going to have to vote against it if we're going to retain this line. The city will distribute the grant amount, if any, upon written request by the Art Society at the beginning of the fiscal year or thereafter.
What is it?
So
I believe
we
that we
already
could
have.
amend the resolution, or when you adopt the resolution, you could ask for an amendment with an amendment to the contract that states that instead of this term that we will do this, and then we will just revise the contract with the resolution.
Except the difficulty is they've already signed the contract.
So we have a motion and a second.
So I'll withdraw the motion while we work this out.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry, please continue now that the motion's been withdrawn.
I'm just saying that if, now I lost my train of thought.
Well, so I think what we want is for the contract to be revised slightly and have them sign the new contract
have-
and then bring it back to
Yeah.
us for a consent agenda.
Because if we say, well, let's amend it now, and they come back, and of course, if they come back and say, no, we're not gonna sign it, then they're out their money, so I guess either way, it doesn't matter.
With that comment, I saw, Mr. Dodd's light is back on.
Yeah, I was just gonna point that out. I mean, yes, they have already signed. Obviously, if the council decides that they wanna have some amendments in the agreement, we can make those amendments and then the council could sign it. It would no longer, have their signature on it. We'd have to get them to re-sign. And obviously, they would have the option not to re-sign if they chose to, but I don't know if the council would mind if they chose not to.
So could we change that last line to read, the city will distribute the grant amount, if any, not sooner than January 1st of the year of the request, upon the written request by the Art Society? There's got to be a cleaner way to write that. I don't like wordsmithing from the dais, but something along those lines.
I'm going to move to postpone this item for 2 for 2 weeks, so that we can clean up that line, and I'll just do a motion to postpone.
Councilman Green, can I ask, in your motion, I was going to just suggest a motion to postpone, but in your motion to postpone, will you not put a time constraint on 2 weeks because their executive director's out on a health issue? I just want to make sure we have time to bring it back as soon as possible.
But if we postpone it, all right, I'm just.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, so here's the deal. We've already gone a year with this, and it shouldn't have taken a year to get to this point. And I'm going to be blunt there. But the fact of the matter is, what we're bringing it back is bring it back for council approval, not their executive director's approval. If we change this, it brings it back to for our approval, and then we get the contract signed, and we can take it to them, and we can either say sign it, and this will bind you, or you don't sign it, and they don't get the money. So I don't see why changing a couple of words that we can work out in a couple of weeks is a big deal.
Councilman, I'm fine with that if you don't care that it's countersigned prior to adoption by the council. I thought that was a preferred practice whenever possible.
So I think that's a preferred practice, is primarily when it comes to land use, when we're looking at an MDA or something like that. In this case, where it's not so much of a partnership, more of a sponsorship, and the council setting the requirements, I'm comfortable moving forward with it as proposed. Mr. Anderson, is the light intentional?
Yeah, I was just looking through council rules real quickly because I'm not sure it's a required practice, but I do believe it's a preferred practice that agreements are signed before they come to the council by the other party. And I'm just checking into that.
Yeah.
I'll withdraw my motion to postpone. And we'll let somebody else figure out how they want to do that.
Councilmember Pack.
Well, thank you. So it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Cultural Arts Society has signed the contract, and so it's waiting for our ratification and signage. We're just making a quote-unquote counteroffer with one clarification on there. And so couldn't we just insert that, as you mentioned, it's kind of hard to wordsmith from the dais, but it doesn't seem like it'd be too hard to say that the funding would be concurrent with the ensuing calendar year, January 1st. Then we sign it and give them to them to sign. But as Office Director Anderson mentioned, maybe it's supposed to be the other way around and come to us instead of us giving it to them. But that way we're not signing their version of the contract and we're just expediting the process.
So before we jump over to Councilmember Jacob, I'll just point out that council rules are our procedures, our best practices. They can be suspended if the council so desires. We can move as makes most sense and kind of go with sense rather than procedure. So the other question I would have is, in the 20 minutes that we've been discussing, has anybody been able to come up with a sentence that we could insert in there? Councilmember Jacob.
I have a radical idea.
Let's hear it.
This is outside the box. Bear with me on this. This is kind of crazy, but I think it might get us all kind of lined up where we need to be. Why are we having them report on calendar years and funding them on fiscal years? Why don't we just have them report on fiscal years? We give them money in July. They report in July on the previous fiscal year, and we give them more money the next July. And just do it on fiscal years.
We did try that, but the ZAP tax application is not on a fiscal year, and all of their budgets and their audits, and I mean, there's a lot that runs on a calendar year versus a fiscal year. So yes, we can make them jump through our hoop, but you probably won't get the same kind of report that you are going to go, well, the ZAP application is old because it was 6 months ago.
Yeah, but there's all kinds of things that straddle fiscal years, right? I mean, there's we had ARPA money that half was in one year and half was in the other year, so we had to change the budget to 200,000 here, 200,000 there, or whatever. It happens all the time.
I think one of the reasons why, and I'll just, Zach, I think this is the thing that complicates it, is they changed their tax year to January. Wasn't that when they were there?
They changed their tax year to our fiscal year.
Did they change their tax year to our fiscal year?
Right, but for us to get ready for the budget, we're going to have them report on. This took us like 3 hours of working on a calendar with them and us to say this would work in a meeting. And I understand the concerns with the reporting time period, and but it was very thought out on our part. Certainly, we didn't. The easiest thing would have been fiscal year, but it didn't work for like the request and the reporting to happen.
Council, if you'll postpone this,
We'll rework it out, I
we'll-
guess.
we know the concerns. We can go back, work with them. I just want to give them a chance to say, yes, that works for us too. Because as Denise implied, it was very complicated. It seems like a really straightforward thing. It was not as straightforward as we would like. And if you'll postpone it, we'll bring it back as soon as possible.
So I'm not seeing any other council member lights. I move to postpone resolution 20-013 to the next reasonable council meeting as determined by council leadership.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember McConaughey, second by Councilmember Worthen. Any discussion to the motion? I think we can do all in favor on this one, right? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Chair rules motion passes 6-1. I believe that was just Councilmember Green in opposition. Do we need to do a roll call where we had non-unanimity?
It's an electronic meeting. We have to take a roll call
Yeah,
vote.
because we have one member who's participating electronically.
Yes, I was just
Okay.
conferring.
Ms. Quick.
Vice Chair Bloom,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Green,
No.
Chair McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
I show the motion passes 6-1.
I'm just going to make a point. On the screen right now, it says approve resolution. It should be postponed. So is you correct? So just so will you correct that? Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
All right, next item is resolution 23-014, which updates the previously mentioned council rules or council policies and procedures. We've had a couple of prior work sessions to review these. Mr. Anderson, do you need to provide any info on this?
No, no,
Or
I
guess
do
Ms.
not.
Hanson?
I just wanted to report back that I put the motions all on one page again. And there's several other corrections that have been made within the past few meetings in the final document. So we're hoping for adoption tonight.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm going to move to approve resolution number 23-014.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion to the motion. We'll start with Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. I have a few things. On page 12, line 205, public comment number 4. It states something about increasing council time may be done by basically I just want to say our council rules should match and it should have council chair there. And it doesn't currently.
Can you repeat that page
This
number for
this
me?
is the red line version you're looking at, right?
Let me pull it up.
Or
I'm looking at my notes. I'm looking online. Yeah, I think it's the red line version.
No,
Yes, it was the red
I'm
line version.
not seeing or line numbers on the red line version. Let me look at the
Why?
revised
What did I
and
say, page
reorganized
12?
version.
We'll go to page 12. It probably doesn't have lines, Chris. Sorry.
Okay, page
It's number 4.
Which section is that under, Council Member Whitelock?
It is 205.
Thank you.
It says, if the council chair deems a person will be speaking as a representative of a group, the council may allow up to 5 minutes to address, but it's really, I think it should say council chair, not council, because I don't want to be taking a vote on whether we're giving them 5 minutes. So, page 14.
So, let's see, we have a motion and a second. Since this isn't quite
This is-
directed at the motion, I'm wondering if the motion might be rescinded and then replaced with an alternative that includes this, if there's a desire to accept the change, or if there's not a desire to accept potential changes, we proceed with the vote. The motion was made.
I'm going to withdraw the motion. And then I'm going to wonder why we spent the time on a work session to go over this so that we can go over it again. So we'll let somebody else make the motion.
Probably because when we re-review, we see things. This is the final copy. I want to ensure that what I'm voting on is good.
But on the previous change, you talk about the council, or the council chair. If somebody comes in before us and says, I'm representing a group, we always have said, which was the council, that you now have 5 minutes. It's not at the discretion of the council chair. That's been a council rule that says the council gives you 5 minutes because you're representing a group. I don't see why council chair makes any difference in the first change that you made.
Okay. On 14, page 14, number 5B, I think you want to get rid of the word B. It reads really funny.
14, number 5B. Is this the page as numbered in the PDF?
Are you
or-
discussing section 301, Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes. Yes.
Currently, it says council members attending electronically shall remain active participants.
Yeah. The B sounds awkward to me, but if everyone's happy with it, it's fine.
Councilmember Whitelock, if I could jump in, we also jump here from section 4 to section 6.
You're right.
I'm-
on mine, we don't.
We need, obviously this needs some more work. I'm wondering if we just shouldn't go through the changes and then I'll make a motion to postpone.
I don't know that we need to postpone. I have one more, that's all. And it's on page 23. Chapter 3, number 4.
council staff shall not engage in any election that.
Needs validation
that
by
one.
city attorney. You don't want that in there?
Yeah, that was one of my notes.
Strike that one. Just the other two.
Would you also want to include with a potential motion, whoever is making the motion, that we can correct any numbering? I'll admit this was my responsibility and I probably got a little too excited about the trip I just went on and could have paid closer attention to those two changes. So I'd be more than happy to fix that for the council.
Chair, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna make a motion. Well, let's try this one on for size. I move to approve resolution 23-014 with the added instruction that we bring back a list of typographical and or numbering errors for an amendment to be approved as soon as reasonable. Is that, once again, I'm going outside the box.
Motion fails for lack of a second.
I would move that we approve resolution 23014, changing page 14, 5B, and getting rid of the word B. I also would prefer that we add page 12205, public comment number 4, to include council chair. You clear on the motion, Cindy?
That doesn't have any numbering issue fixes.
Thank you. And that we ask Ms. Hanson to fix any numbering issues.
And motion fails for.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Whitelock, second by Councilmember Green. Discussion to the motion. My only discussion is similar to what Councilmember Green said. As he and I were going through trying to wordsmith that particular portion, the thought process that we were trying to articulate was that the time is given to the speaker by the council, and the chair is acting on behalf of the council. That's why we came up with kind of the bouncing back and forth, and is this the chair or is this the council? And you'll see it kind of bounces between the two in those few lines. So that part had been intentional. That said, I'm not going to vote against it if we changed it. Any other discussion to the motion? All right, let's vote. Ms. Quick.
Chair McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Vice Chair Bloom.
Yes.
Councilmember Pack.
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 7-0.
And that would bring us to our next business item, which is ordinance 22-13, fixing some of those items in Title I that we discussed a few weeks ago. It looks like Ms. Hanson's name's associated with this one as well.
Yes, I'm trying to tweet and speak at the same time, and it is not going well. But this refers back to some of the changes in Title I. There were changes in the definitions. This is also where we talked about changing reporting requirements for finances in terms of candidates. And we talked about redistricting in this one. There was a lot of changes in Title I. So we took those changes and brought them back to you in hopefully a clean document, as I hope for the best here.
Any questions from the council or perhaps a motion? Councilmember Whitelock.
Page 9, line 129 only has the council director. Policies and procedures has chair. Do you want to add chair there or no?
Is there any opposition from the council to adding chair? This was which line?
129.
129, and oh, I have the wrong document actual ordinance. Or yeah, not the change in code. I'm not seeing any opposition, so would welcome a motion that includes that. That includes that modification.
Okay, I'll move that we approve ordinance number 2313, amending page 9, line 129 to add council chair.
I'll second. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Whitelock, second by Councilmember Worthen. Any discussion to the motion? Councilmember Pack.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it's putting in council chair where it's already stricken out, just that the exact same place where it's redlined? Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion to the motion, let's look to Ms. Quick for a vote.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bloom,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
and Chair McConaughey.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 7-0.
All right, that brings us to everybody's favorite Open and Public Meetings Act training. I see Mr. Murray has this one, so Duncan, we'll turn it over to you. And you said you could keep this to an hour and a half, right?
Can I
Or even just 10 minutes.
request that we approve I'm just gonna ask if we can go out of order. Why don't we just approve the consent items? And then the rest of the meeting belongs to Mr. Murray.
We've already suspended the rules to allow for items to be taken out of order. So if you want to take a motion, or if you want to propose a motion,
I'm gonna move to approve the consent calendar.
second. Motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember McConaughey. Not seeing any lights for discussion to the motion. Ms. Quick, could you have us vote?
You can do that voice vote. There's no resolution.
If there's a no, it would have to go back. So in the interest of time that has already been wasted.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Pack,
Yes.
Councilmember Worthen,
Yes.
Chair McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Green,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bloom.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 7-0.
All right, Mr. Duncan, time is now yours.
All right. So Open and Public Meetings Act. I'll be quick. I know it's late. There are three fundamental main principles when it comes to the Open Meetings Act. There's, I think it's the slide right before that one. There's due process, there's openness, there's public, I guess that is it. There's due process, there's openness, and everything's done in the public meetings. Due process we talk about a lot of times, but it's really just fair notice and fair hearing, right? It's just an opportunity for people to show up, watch, and when there's an opportunity to participate in a public comments period or a public hearing, to be able to participate. So we talk about openness as transparency sometimes, and let's see, somehow we advanced quite a few slides, so maybe we can.
Speaking with Mr. Anderson, there
Do I
were
have
originally
the,
something like 15 slides that have been consolidated down to about 4. So that might be what you're seeing.
So just starting at the beginning. Oh, well, I guess it's just totally different than what I thought we had. So I don't know why it's starting on closed meetings, but that's okay. I'll just talk. So the policy is set forth in Title 52, Chapter 4. It's just all the actions are taken openly. You deliberate openly. Everybody gets to watch everything that's happening. And so there's really the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. I mean, it's OPMA
Open Public Meetings Act is short, right? It's not too many pages. And so there's not going to be a specific rule for every specific situation. So the spirit of the law is what you look at a lot of times. And if there's a question and it's not specifically in the law, I think it's good to remember that the spirit is that your deliberations are in the open, and your actions are in the open. And so, you know, by example, if there was a question that came up, and it does sometimes, texting between elected officials in an open meeting, if the texting was procedural, it probably wouldn't matter, right? Because that's not really a deliberation, it's not really an action, it's just procedural. If, however, the issue was one of substance or voting, even though there may not be a specific rule in the Open Public Meetings Act, the spirit of the law saying that, and it says it, like I say, right in 52-4-102, that the actions and deliberations have to be open. The best practice would be to probably not do that, right? To not have any kind of a text about a voting or a substantive issue. So we talk about, in the context of Open Meetings Act, what is a meeting? State law says for councils with a 7-member council that it's 4 as a quorum whenever that quorum meets, right? Then that's an open meeting. And there's no distinction really if it's a workshop or a committee of the whole, or whether it's a closed or executive session, that once you're convened, then, and you've got at least 4 present, then that's a meeting, right? It's a little different when it comes to the Planning Commission and some other public bodies where it doesn't say right in state statute what a quorum is, but that's your city code that spells that out, right? And in our case, the code allows for the bylaws to say what a quorum is, and the bylaws for the Planning Commission do say it is 4 out of 7. But in theory, it could be 3 out of 7 or whatever. But the question comes up a lot is, we know what a meeting is, but what is not a meeting, right? And we know what's not a meeting is a chance meeting, a social gathering, a training. You guys, I guess, isn't it next month in April where you go to League of Cities and Towns training? It's possible you could have a quorum there. You might have a social gathering at a ribbon cutting or whatever it might be. And so a lot of times the question comes up, well, should that be posted, right? Is that a meeting? Because we know that if there's a meeting, you have to have an agenda, you have to post it at least 24 hours in advance. And again, Open and Public Meetings Act doesn't nail down every little nuance. But again, those overarching principles of doing the business in public, acting and deliberating in public, come into play. And a lot of times I've seen people use kind of some litmus tests of, you know, was it organized by the city? Was it paid for by the city? Is it connected to a city issue? I was the city attorney for a small city up north, Perry, and Perry had a special field trip in advance of a council meeting. And the field trip was to go to Brigham City and look at what they did and what the Perry City Council was considering adopting in their land use code. And then later on their agenda, in the real meeting after the field trip, then they had a discussion about it, right? So I erred on the side of playing it safe and saying, well, it really is something organized by the city. In fact, and you know, and it's connected to a city issue. So we erred on the side of just putting it on the agenda, saying there was a field trip in advance of the meeting. Somebody could have followed along, nobody did, but in theory they could. But you don't necessarily have to get carried away with that if it's something that, again, is, especially if it's not officially organized by the city, not paid for by the city, not connected to a city issue. Probably it's just a social gathering. Don't need to post it and so forth. But I really think it's helpful to just kind of look at those general principles. The other thing that comes up a lot is reasonable specificity on agenda topics. Oh, there you go. So, but
So quick question.
yeah,
Is this the slide that you're speaking to right now?
no, I'm just kind of blasting through it all. So, but if you had a question on it, happy to hear it. So we could probably just go all the way to near the one that says open meetings, public notice. But your agenda topics should be reasonably specific. Sometimes it comes up during a meeting. You might talk about something that is not on the agenda. That's typically fine if you're not taking any action, especially if you're just making a procedural motion to put it on another agenda. I think one of the things that a lot of times we play it safe on is not having straw polls. Yeah, that's the slide right there. Because that kind of feels like deliberating or taking action, right? That's one that's probably, but if it's a matter of just a procedural motion to schedule it for a subsequent meeting where it is discussed, that's probably a little bit better and to keeping in that spirit of deliberating and acting in the open. All right. And then that next slide, open meetings, the minutes and records, of course, are a very important part. Minutes don't have to be transcripts; they're just a summary. There is a recording as well. Obviously the official record though is the minutes, and so I think it's important to make sure that you know that they are accurate. So I could probably go on to the next one. Basically, we're trying to make those records available to the public, right? And then the next slide, talking about closed meetings. We know that there's you have to have a quorum present, 2/3 vote, only for those limited purposes. And those limited purposes are on the next slide, right? One of the ones that's been added a little bit over or just modified, the real estate purchase, exchange, lease, and sale to include water rights and shares and so forth. Those can be talked about. Sometimes it's hard to know if you fit into one of those categories, right? And if you look at the next page, the enforcement one, the next slide, I referenced there this Kearns Tribune Corporation versus Salt Lake County. It's a Utah Supreme Court case from 2001, and it's an interesting fact pattern, but it basically was a case where there was an annexation and one city was considering an annexation petition. I think there was an objection to it. It was going to the County Boundary Commission. There was a deliberation of the County Commission in a closed session. And if you look back on the slide before, do you see anything about annexation deliberation on the list of types of matters that can be discussed in a closed session? It's not there, right? How do you think the Supreme Court ruled? Well, actually, you're partially right. The district court ruled against the county, but the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor. And it kind of surprised me as I read the fact pattern too for the first time. I'm like, but it's not on the list. But the Supreme Court thought of it as a specialized type of litigation, right? And that is one of the items that's on there. It's not court, but a boundary commission is kind of acting as an appeal authority of sorts and balancing whether or not that annexation petition should be approved or not, or how the objection fits in, and it's acting in kind of a quasi-judicial capacity. And so Salt Lake County actually won on that one, kind of surprising. But the main thing is that as we think about these issues, there's always something new that comes up, and there's two ways to check ourselves. One is to read the short Open Public Meetings Act. Another way is to just remember those key principles of conducting your deliberations and actions in public. So that was kind of my shortened version. What questions do you have, or thoughts, or?
Questions from the council? At 8:49 p.m., I am not seeing too many. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And for those listening, there may not have been many questions, but this is something that we do annually, and we frequently bring up questions with our attorney. And sometimes we're not as quick to recognize lights, so I'll go back to Councilmember Worthen.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. Duncan, thank you for taking the time to put those slides together. Apparently, we had some kind of IT issue, but very much appreciate you taking the time and going over that.
All right. Well, we will proceed. Consent items have already been taken care of. We'll go to City Council remarks. Are there any remarks people would like to share before we adjourn? Councilmember Whitelock.
Since Bob is still here, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your fine leadership for that committee. You did a great job, as was mentioned, keeping it going and keeping everyone on task. So thank you. Thank you for all that you did.
Councilmember Worthen.
I sent you all an email earlier today. I apologize if some of you didn't get to see it because it was today. I just kind of wanted to get a feel to see who would be, if we had 4 people that would be interested in having our staff look at possibly bringing on a communications person. That could be part-time, full-time, kind of depends on, but basically I'm just looking for 4 people that would be interested in looking at doing it. Do I have enough that would be interested in just not voting on anything? We're just looking at.
I'm not seeing.
Just a clarifying question. So I checked out the email. Thank you. So is that coming from which body is our council office wanting to know if we're?
I just want to
wanting
know if there are 4 people interested in looking at a new position for our staff. Just looking at it, just
Gotcha.
getting an idea. Could say yes or no, just looking at it.
Definitely. I just didn't know if it was going toward them or they were communicating
This
with
is
us
it's
on
me.
it.
This is a discussion that's not on the agenda. Can we move on? This is not.
I don't want
It's
to have
not a
I just
discussion
wanna
that
see
we
if
can
4
have.
people are interested.
No, but there's a discussion going back and forth, and that's that we just had that about it has to be on the agenda.
I didn't want to discuss it. I just wanted to see like 4 head nods if we had enough people.
So I'm seeing 2 that say yes, put this on the agenda. 3. All right, it looks like there are 3 that are in favor of discussion. So council rules require that we have at least 2. I believe last I checked, 3 is greater than 2.
Okay. And then because I always like to do my shout out at the end. I had a conversation with Denise earlier, and I'm kind of bummed she left because I don't get to do this in front of her, but I did say this to her. It takes a very unique person that can look at a budget and be very analytical, but then still understand they're dealing with people. Because you do have a lot of corporations, and honestly, I mean, if you look at the city, we're a pretty big company if you took it on a corporate level with all the employees that we have. And so sometimes that gets lost, where you get so analytical, you forget they're human beings behind those numbers. So I complimented her personally, but I want to do it publicly as well. We have a really good finance director that not only looks at the analytical side to do what's right, she also understands that we're dealing with the employees and they're human beings. So that's what I wanted to say. I want to give a shout out to Denise tonight for really being that perfect centered numbers person, I guess. Anyway, that's it.
Any other comments or remarks, Councilmember Pack?
Oh, thank you. Just briefly, I'm taking a class currently from Stanford University. It's called High Level Decision Making Analytics. And I'm doing that because in all of our conversations here, I thought I want to make sure that I'm focusing on the right things. And so one takeaway from it that I thought was interesting is decoupling the results from the process. Sometimes you have a great process and lousy results. Sometimes you can have lousy results or a lousy process and great results. It's been very interesting to see how we can apply that here to our deliberation. Sometimes things don't work out the way you intended, but if you can decouple the process from the results, it's very interesting. So I'll keep striving to work on our process when I'm trying to deliberate on that decision. So thank you.
All right. I know I checked with Councilmember Bloom. She did not have any closing remarks. So, council administrative items. Alan, if you could quickly share, just wanted to show a brief overview of what we're anticipating for our next work session. Can this be enlarged to a point where it's close to readable? And this is why I'm appreciative of the council for allowing a little bit of flexibility. Most of our meetings don't go perfectly. There's some hiccups. Having a little bit of flexibility to adjust so that we could have the extended update about what happened with the legislature, and still also make sure that we're hearing from the public, giving the public an opportunity to speak during the public hearing as soon as possible in the meeting. Sometimes not all of our goals always align, so having a little flexibility was appreciated. It was mentioned by a couple folks that it was preferred to have that conversation tonight, even if we did have to juggle a little bit, because this is what our next conversation looks like. Now, our next meeting that we have as a committee of the whole, it's not a formal council meeting, so these are mostly discussion topics, but we're bringing back the conversation that we had earlier on landlord-tenant utilities. Staff has had some time, and they're looking to bring this to us. We're looking at, I believe this one's a council-led initiative for modifying some of the setbacks in the PRD and PC zones so that we're not 100% dependent on the MDA. We'll talk a little bit about Gold Star Memorial possibility for Veterans Memorial Park, lift stations, special assessments versus HOAs, and the Youth City Council. We have a lot of items that'll be up for discussion, and just wanted to take a brief second so that everybody saw what was on the agenda coming up. We'll have our regular council meeting the following week. But just want to give a little clarity and understanding as to why it's appreciative of council to allow for that flexibility and appreciation when we talked about, do we need extra time to talk about the general plan? You can see what's coming and why sometimes those additional meetings may be helpful. So with that, I don't have any further items and would look to Councilmember Green for
Move to adjourn.
Second.
motion by Councilmember Green, second by Councilmember Whitelock. I realize this isn't land use, but if this is unanimous, it does not become subject to a referendum, apparently. So, all in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not hearing any, so we don't need to redo it by voice or by person, so we will stand adjourned.